Chapter 624. Senior Marshal Brother Chun continued. Senior Marshal Brothers, in order to verify whether or not my Senior Marshal Brother killed the Thunder Tiger, I just wanted to send half of my Outer Sanctum disciples out to investigate. However, I thought that if the Thunder Tiger was not killed, wouldn't we have fallen into the trap of creating a diversion? Therefore, I would like to ask all of you to hurry up and get to the place where Senior Sister Zhang met Lei Hu last night. If we can find Lei Hu's corpse, wouldn't everyone be relieved? Okay, that's right. When the disciples heard this, they seemed to be injected with new hope. They were all in high spirits, and their actions were not the same as before. Not long after, they packed up. Even Zhang Pinger, who was standing next to them, was stunned. Zhang Pinger sat in the front carriage under the leadership of Senior Brother Chun, and Zhang Xiaohua was still at the back, so naturally they could not meet. Zhang Xiaohua looked at Lu Chaoxian, whose face had recovered some color and his eyes were full of vitality, and asked, "Senior Brother Lu, how about I drive the carriage today? You can rest in the carriage?" No. Lu Chaoxian flatly refused. "If I can't see Lei Hu's body, how can I sleep well? Let me do it." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and still stood in the carriage, watching the team begin to move forward again. This time, it was obviously much faster than yesterday. Every disciple wanted to know their fate as soon as possible. After a while, Zhang Xiaohua finally could not restrain her curiosity and asked, "Senior Brother Lu, is the one called Zhang Pinger an inner disciple?" All the inner disciples I've seen in the past had their faces covered." Lu Chaoxian was a little surprised and asked, "How many inner disciples have you seen?" And all of them were masked. Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. What kind of people were they? Just now they were worried about her safety, but now they were so gossipy. But she naturally would not say that she had seen Chun Shan and others, so she had to say with a smile, "When we entered the valley, our team followed Master Kong's team and met other messengers. Later, we learned that they were all inner disciples." Oh, so that's how it is. Realization dawned on Lu Chaoxian. He wasn't a disciple of Rejuvenation Valley and naturally didn't know such details. He continued, "The Lord Kong you met had his face covered. He was a true inner sect disciple. This Senior Sister Zhang Pinger is an inner sect disciple of alchemy. She is different from Lord Kong's inner sect disciple." Zhang Xiaohua slapped her forehead. Didn't Shin Fengxiao tell her about the origins of the old consecrators of the pill department a few days ago? Didn't they come from the inner sect's alchemy department? It seemed like this Zhang Xiaohua was a disciple who specialized in alchemy for the inner sect disciples. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua asked softly, "Then are they not under the jurisdiction of our pill expanding hall?" "Of course." Lu Chaoxian nodded and said, "Inner sect alchemists cultivate their inner strength from a young age. Their martial arts aren't inferior to outer sect disciples. Their treatment can't be compared to ours." Junior Brother Run, if you can enter the inner sect, you'll have the potential to become an inner sect alchemist disciple. Do you really think you can become an inner sect disciple? Zhang Xiaohua rubbed her nose and said, "Forget it. Seeing as 30-something senior brothers have to call this girl senior sister, I'm sick of it. It's better to stay on Tianmu Peak." Lu Chaoxian approved of Zhang Xiaohua's lack of ambition and said with a smile, "That's right. Our Tianmu Peak is far away from the Emperor. As long as Headmaster Chen protects you, you can do whatever you want. Moreover, your martial arts are so strong. After a few years, won't you be even more free and unfettered when you become second master?" Hearing the words second master, Zhang Xiaohua swayed on the carriage and almost fell. She only curled her lips and said, "Let Senior Brother Chiu be second master." After saying that, she hid in the carriage and didn't talk about cultivating. The place where Zhang Xiaohua killed Lei Hu last night was between the pool and the camp. Even if a horse galloped at full speed, it would take nearly 4 hours to get there, not to mention this mighty fleet of carriages. However, the disciples of Wuming Hall were very eager to try and find out in advance. Well, especially if Lei Hu's tail was still there. After all, there was Bloodwolf's corpse in front of them. Everyone was hoping that they would be lucky. What if they had met an inner disciple last night? However, Senior Brother Chun of Wuming Hall was afraid that there would be an accident. He didn't dare to let go of the disciples and just escorted the carriage. It wasn't until late in the morning that the carriage gradually approached the place where the incident happened. Zhang Pinger stood on the carriage and carefully observed the surroundings. Suddenly, her eyes lit up and she whispered, "Junior Brother Chun, we're here." "We're here?" Senior Brother Chun, who had been on tenterhooks, suddenly stood up. He looked around and whispered, "Senior Sister Zhang, on the way here, we only met Piang and Elk." Looking at their peaceful expressions, it seems that they weren't harassed by Lei Hu. Moreover, we didn't meet Lei Hu again. You see, Zhang Pinger nodded and said, "That's right. I heard from Master that if we were targeted by Lei Hu, he would harass us whenever he had time. It has been more than 4 hours since this morning. Logically speaking, we should be fine." Senior Brother Chin's heart shook. He jumped off the carriage and said, "Senior Brothers of Wuming Hall, the place where the incident happened is in front. Quickly dismount and surround it." All the outer sect disciples immediately jumped off their horses and held long swords in their hands. They stood in a seemingly disorderly manner and slowly walked forward. Zhang Xiaohua, who was standing far behind the carriage, had her eyes lit up. Although the outer sect disciples were walking forward in a disorderly manner, there was a faint connection between them. A group of disciples was a complete formation. Zhang Xiaohua nodded secretly. The outer sect disciples' martial arts were of different levels, that definitely couldn't survive in front of Lei Hu. However, with the help of this formation, they might be able to escape unscathed. The fragrant cult was indeed extraordinary. Even ordinary outer sect disciples could be taught simple formations. This must be the reason why the Hall Master of Wuming Hall sent them into the valley for training. Zhang Xiaohua's estimation was right. However, she still overestimated the strength of Wuming Hall. The disciples of Wuming Hall were not very clear about what this formation was. However, every disciple of Wuming Hall had to practice the route and cooperate with each other well before they could enter the valley. Therefore, they only thought of cooperation at this dangerous moment. If it was normal, they might not be able to use it. Zhang Pinger and Senior Brother Chin walked in front of the crowd and gradually approached. Perhaps the female disciple had sharp eyes, or perhaps Zhang Pinger had been here before. After walking for a while, Zhang Pinger's cold face faintly showed an imperceptible smile. Then she stopped and pointed to the grass in front of them and said, "Junior Brother Chun, in front of us is the place where I met Lei Hu last night. I have already seen Lei Hu's fur over there." When Senior Apprentice Brother Chin heard this, he was overjoyed and wanted to go forward to check. However, Zhang Pinger cupped her hands and said, "Since Lei Hu has already been killed by your disciple, I won't stay any longer. Junior Apprentice Brothers, the Orchid Dusk refinement is extremely dangerous." After saying this, she did not wait for Senior Brother Chun and other disciples to return the salute. She jumped out of the formation of Wuming Hall and went straight to the east. When she passed by the carriages of Pill Expanding Hall, she glanced at them casually and saw Zhang Xiaohua standing on the carriage. Her eyes lit up, but then she showed a self-mocking smile and shook her head slightly, saying secretly, "How could it be?" Then she stepped on the grass and flew away with the lightness skill of flying on grass. After Zhang Pinger walked away, Zhang Xiaohua patted her chest and said secretly, "That was close. Fortunately, I took the handkerchief. Otherwise, he would have recognized me. It seems that I have to find a mask in the future." While Zhang Xiaohua was thinking, she heard a cheer in front of her. It was the disciples of Wuming Hall who found Lei Hu's body. Smiling, Zhang Xiaohua did not care about Lu Chaoxian. She happily jumped off the carriage and ran into the crowd. She was about to go back to the carriage to cultivate, but when she just moved, she saw that all the disciples were going to watch the fun. She could not help shaking her head and jumped off the carriage, following the crowd. Within the crowd, the Wuming Hall's disciples, who had cheered, were stunned as they stared at Lei Hu, whose head had been smashed. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. This which Wuming Hall's disciple did this. That's right. If Lei Hu was killed with a sword or a saber, they could imagine it. Perhaps this senior brother's inner strength was profound, and his moves were exquisite. He could find Lei Hu's weakness in the midst of danger and kill him in one blow. However, these disciples had thought of all the ways Lei Hu could be killed, including being stabbed in the throat like a bloody wolf. However, they had never thought that Lei Hu's head would be smashed into mush. What weapon did this senior brother use? Bronze hammer? Iron rod? Or shooting star mace? But according to senior sister Zhang, this senior brother appeared empty-handed yesterday. He did not have any heavy weapons. Could it be that he used his fists? Senior brother Chun searched Lei Hu's body and did not find any other fatal wounds. He could not help but think of an explanation that even he himself could not believe. Perhaps only an inner disciple can kill Lei Hu with his bare hands. Senior brother Chun sighed and thought to himself, but if it was an inner disciple, why did he cut off Lei Hu's tail? Inner disciples do not use the trial points, so why did he keep the tail? If it was an outer disciple of Wuming Hall, which tall and thin senior brother has such martial arts skills, it's impossible. After thinking for a long time, senior brother Chun patted his forehead and laughed secretly. Who cares who he is? Anyway, Lei Hu's been killed. We are no longer in danger of being chased. Let's save our lives first. Why think so much? Thus, he instructed a few disciples to carry Lei Hu's corpse and place it on the carriage. Then, he reorganized the caravan and continued to move forward. On the road again, there was no more depression and fear like yesterday. Not only were the disciples of the Pill Repository Hall whispering to each other, trying to figure out the origin of this mysterious master, even the disciples of the Wuming Hall who were guarding the road were exchanging opinions in groups of two, wanting to know which senior brother had done this. Zhang Xiaohua, on the other hand, remained unperturbed and continued his cultivation of the immortal Tao. Chapter 625. Seeing that the Thunder Tiger was killed by an outer disciple, the people in the convoy were relieved and continued to move forward. It took them half a day to reach the pool. At this time, there were no beasts drinking water in the pool. There were still birds chirping and frogs croaking, because they were worried that they would encounter ferocious beasts that occasionally came to drink water. The Pill Expanding Hall's convoy only stopped for a while and let the disciples who had no water in their water bags add some water before continuing to move forward. After passing the pool, not far ahead was the orchid rainforest. Looking far ahead, they saw that the sky above the jungle was a low-pressure black cloud, while the grassland next to it was unusually clear. Zhang Xiaohua, who had been cultivating for a while, stood on the carriage and looked at all of this with interest. Everything in the world, including wind, rain, thunder, and lightning, were all within the heavenly Tao. Paying attention to all changes in daily life will be helpful to the understanding of the heavenly Tao. I just don't know if the climate change in this rainforest is the effect of the array or the difference in the weather here. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't guess. When the convoy reached the front of the jungle, the dark clouds in the sky had disappeared without a trace. The leader, senior brother Chun, also let out a long sigh and raised his hand. Junior brothers, we finally got out of the Orchid Prairie. Our journey is nearly half done. Moreover, here, the blood wolves, thunder tigers, and other ferocious beasts will not chase after us. You can rest at ease. When we enter the orchid rainforest, we still have to be careful. All the disciples agreed and stopped the carriage to take a rest. Zhang Xiaohua, who loved to learn and ask questions, leaned in front of Lu Chaoxian and asked, "Senior brother, this rainforest won't be the same as the jungle in the valley, right? Also, there aren't any dangerous beasts, right?" Lu Chaoxian drank 2 mouthfuls of water and said with a smile, "The jungle in the valley is the gateway to the orchid prairie. Naturally, it's very dangerous. This jungle is just an ordinary forest. Of course, it's not the same. It's just that the climate here is a bit strange." Zhang Xiaohua listened and smiled without saying a word. He didn't believe that there was nothing strange about this jungle. How could there be dark clouds covering the sky for no reason and only this rainforest? However, his divine sense wasn't very good at the moment. Just relying on probing within a radius of 10 zhong was tantamount to peeking at a leopard through a tube. He couldn't fully grasp the situation. As for the ferocious beasts, Junior Brother Run, in this Yulon Grand Canyon, There are ferocious beasts everywhere. With martial arts like yours and mine, we would be oppressed wherever we go. However, the path that we are on now is paved by the blood and sweat of our ancestors. All right, you didn't bring any antidotes with you when you came, right? See, I knew you didn't prepare any. Hee, it's okay, I have some here. If you get bitten by a poisonous snake later, use mine. I've made ample preparations. Lin Fan was stunned. He was stunned for a moment before he said, "That's right." Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. She didn't expect Lu Chaoxian to be so talkative. Sentence after sentence, he didn't allow her to speak at all. Well, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't understand. Lu Chaoxian was still wondering if he could reach the rainforest last night. Now that the Thunder Tiger had been killed and they had reached the rainforest safely, the stone in his heart was lifted. How could he not feel that the world was so beautiful? It was normal for him to talk a little more. However, although Lu Chaoxian spoke a lot, none of it was what Zhang Xiaohua wanted to hear. Until the carriage was about to set off, Zhang Xiaohua didn't know what other ferocious beasts there were in this rainforest other than poisonous snakes. Looking at Lu Chaoxian's arrogant appearance as he held the whip and drove the carriage, Zhang Xiaohua stood behind with a smile and slightly shook her head. In the face of life and death, it was very difficult to calculate gains and losses. If one didn't have some self-cultivation, it would be very difficult to understand. The orchid rainforest was very different from the forest Zhang Xiaohua had seen before. The trees in this rainforest were very thick and very tall. Moreover, they were all very straight. The crooked trees that were commonly seen in Guizhuang House couldn't be seen here at all. The ground was a little slippery. If the carriage wasn't slippery, even the horses pulling the carriage would often slip and fall. Perhaps it was because of the perennial rain. All kinds of colorful fungi and mushrooms grew in clusters. On the contrary, there were fewer weeds, and it was far less luxuriant than the grassland. The forest was also filled with the constant chirping of birds. It was just that the ancient trees were dense, and it was unknown where they were hiding. Occasionally, a rustling sound could be heard from the treetops above their heads. When they looked up, only the swaying of the branches could be seen. That eye-catching animal was nowhere to be seen. However, Zhang Xiaohua could see clearly. In her spiritual sense, there was a proud squirrel jumping between the branches. From time to time, it would lower its head to look at the unfamiliar carriages that had entered the rainforest. After entering the forest for an hour, there weren't any abnormalities. Occasionally, the horses pulling the carriages would slip and fall. This made many of the nervous disciples feel a lot more relaxed. Zhang Xiaohua didn't retract her spiritual sense and only covered the surroundings. She couldn't help but mutter to herself, "It's very ordinary. There doesn't seem to be anything to be afraid of." Just as she was thinking, she felt her heart tighten as if something was about to happen. However, there was nothing unusual in her spiritual sense. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua whispered, "Senior Lu, be careful. There is something strange in this forest." When Lu Chaoxian heard this, his face tensed up. Just as he was about to raise his head to look, he heard the neighing of a horse in front of him. Lu Chaoxian immediately pulled on the reins. In the middle of the carriages, a deep hole that was 4 to 5 feet wide suddenly appeared on the ground. The horses were caught off guard and immediately fell into the hole. The horses had been trained in the pill expansion hall for a long time. Just as they were about to use their hind legs to pull themselves out of the hole, a long and flat mouth appeared in the hole and bit the horse's neck. The horse neighed again and kicked its forehooves a few times before it was pulled into the deep hole by a huge force. At this moment, the disciple driving the carriage had just gotten up from the ground. He had just released the reins in his hands, but the disciple in the carriage was still in a daze from the impact. He didn't even have time to react. Fortunately, the outer court disciple beside him had quick reflexes. He waved the sword in his hand and cut the ropes around the horse's body. Seeing the majestic horse being dragged into the deep hole, the crowd couldn't help but sweat on their foreheads. What if someone was dragged in? Quick, quick, move the things in this carriage to the other carriages. The disciple in charge of the pill expansion hurried over. When he saw the dark and unfathomable hole, He didn't say anything and hurriedly urged the disciples to move the things in the carriages. Staying by the side of this black hole, anyone would be afraid. Several disciples nimbly finished cleaning up and drove the carriage to the side. When Zhang Xiaohua walked past the deep hole, he used his divine sense to take a look. It turned out to be a deep and long tunnel, and he did not know where the horse that fell into the hole was dragged to. However, when she saw that Lu Chaoxian's face wasn't as shocked as she had imagined, she asked, "Senior Lu, what kind of beast is this?" "I can't say it's a beast. It's just a carnivorous beast that lives underground." "Carnivorous beast?" Zhang Xiaohua frowned. "What kind of beast is that?" Lu Chaoxian smiled. "It's similar to the crocodiles in the river, but much smaller. Its head is pointed at the front, and its mouth is big. It can drill holes in the ground. When wild beasts walk past the holes, it will drag them into the ground and eat them when they are not paying attention." Seeing that Lu Chaoxian actually smiled, Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously, "This carnivorous beast is so dangerous. Senior brother, you don't seem to be afraid of it. Why are you smiling?" "Although carnivorous beasts are dangerous, they don't eat much. The horse that was dragged down just now is enough for them to eat. They probably won't harass us again. We can only be more careful when we go back." "Oh, I see." Zhang Xiaohua nodded. However, before he could raise his head, the corner of his eye twitched. He straightened his body from the horse carriage and took out the jade water sword without hesitation, waving it in front of him. Just as Zhang Xiaohua's body flew up, a colorful poisonous snake scuttled under his feet and flew into the bushes on the other side, disappearing in an instant. Zhang Xiaohua's jade water sword was pointed at a poisonous snake that was pouncing towards Lu Chaoxian. That poisonous snake was like lightning, but Zhang Xiaohua's jade water sword was not slow either. Before it could get close to Lu Chaoxian, Zhang Xiaohua's sword pierced through the snake's head. The poisonous snake's body curled around the jade water sword and then opened up, revealing a colorful rope. Lu Chaoxian heard the commotion behind him and turned around. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was still in the air, he smiled. "Junior brother Ren, you have good qigong." However, when his gaze landed on the poisonous snake on the jade water sword, he turned pale with fright and cried out, "Five-colored snake?" Then he shouted, "Brothers, be careful. There's a five-colored snake." Before he finished speaking, someone cried out, "Io, why didn't you say so earlier?" Someone had been bitten by a snake. Zhang Xiaohua returned to the horse carriage and looked ahead. It was one of the disciples who had united around him. Lu Chaoxian smiled. "Didn't I just see it too? Logically speaking, we should only encounter it after 2 hours. Who knew that it would be so early? Quickly take the antidote. Be careful of the snake's poison attacking your heart." As he spoke, he chuckled and took out a small bag from his chest. Opening it, he took out a handful of spicy things and rubbed them on his body. Then he handed the rest to Zhang Xiaohua, saying, "Many thanks to Junior Brother Ren for your help just now. This five-colored snake's poison is very powerful. Although we have antidotes, being bitten is still very painful. This is realgar, which poisonous snakes are most afraid of. As long as you rub it on your body, you won't be afraid of them." "Really? How is it powerful?" Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua took the rest of the realgar and sniffed it. A pungent, spicy smell wafted over. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly took the realgar far away and handed it to Lu Chaoxian, saying, "Thank you, Senior Brother Lu. However, this really doesn't smell good. It will damage my heroic image. You should keep it. I don't need it." Lu Chaoxian advised, "Even if it doesn't smell good, it's better than eating pain. I think you should apply some." Zhang Xiaohua still shook his head, but at this moment he saw a disciple run over and hurriedly said, "Senior Brother Lu, Junior Brother Ren, quickly go and take a look. Senior Brother Wang might not be able to make it." Chapter 626. Senior Brother Wang? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. Lu Chaoxian said, "It's the junior brother who was bitten by the five-colored snake." Then he immediately stopped and jumped down from the carriage, puzzled. "Didn't you just let him take the antidote pill? How could it be that he can't do it now? By the way, did you inform Senior Brother Su?" The disciple hurriedly said, "Yes, Senior Brother Su is the leader of our pill expansion hall. How could we not inform him?" At this time, the convoy had stopped. In the dark forest, the other disciples were faintly anxious. This was not a good place to park. Just now, a series of carnivorous beasts and 5 colored snakes had appeared. Maybe other beasts would appear soon. Walking to the front of the carriage, he saw Senior Brother Wong lying flat in front of the carriage. His face was already a patch of gray. When he looked at his leg, he saw a 5-colored snake biting on his right leg. However, the lower half of his body was missing. It should have been chopped off. Lu Chaoxian had just arrived when the leader, Senior Brother Su, also came over. He walked to the front and looked at Senior Brother Wong's eyelids. He looked at his mouth and smelled his breath. He frowned and said, "After Junior Brother Wong was bitten by the 5-colored snake, didn't he take the antidote pill?" The disciple called Lu Chaoxian hurriedly said, "Yes, he took it out and took it when he was talking to Senior Brother Lu. Later, I saw that the snake venom was still spreading. I also took out my portion, but it was still useless." I saw Senior Brother Wong's face turn black. "Strange, this antidote pill is most effective against snake venom. It is most effective against 5-colored snakes. How could it be useless? What should we do now?" Lu Chaoxian asked anxiously. Senior Brother Su's face was filled with grief as he said, "His eyes have already collapsed, and there is a sweet fragrance in his breath. I'm afraid that the snake venom has already entered his heart meridians. There is no hope for him. Alas, Junior Brother Lu, let's leave Senior Brother Wong here. We still have to hurry on with our journey. If anything else comes out, Senior Brother Wong won't be the only one to suffer." Lu Chaoxian was anxious, but there was no other way. This was the rule of the Orchid Dusk Refinement. If there was an abnormal situation, it must be dealt with in time. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua walked up and said, "Can I take a look?" Although it was a question, he knew that time was of the essence, and there was no time to waste. He reached out and grabbed Senior Brother Wong's wrist. What are you doing? Hurry up and get in the car. He can't be saved. What are you waiting for?" Senior Apprentice Brother Su was by Yefeng's disciple, so he didn't know Zhang Xiaohua. He had only seen Zhang Xiaohua when she was being scolded by Vice Hall Master Su. He knew that she wasn't a trusted disciple, so he didn't hesitate to scold her. How could Zhang Xiaohua listen to him? She only transferred her true qi over and carefully probed. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was ignoring him, Senior Brother Su could not help but be a little angry. "I am the leader of the disciples. I have already said that this disciple is hopeless. Why are you still putting on an act here? Didn't you not trust me?" Thus, he reached out and pushed Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder. "Stop putting on an act. Hurry up and get back to your car. Now is not the time for you to show off. If another carnivorous beast comes out, none of us will be in a good mood." Who knew that Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder lowered slightly, and she actually dodged. Senior Apprentice Brother Su did not notice and actually pushed empty air. His expression turned even uglier as he immediately shouted, "What is your name? You must be from Tianmu Peak. When you came out, how did Chun Fengxiao educate you?" At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua's true qi had already probed clearly. The Qi Huang technique she learned in Rejuvenation Valley finally had a use. Knowing that Senior Apprentice Brother Wong could still be saved, she retracted her hand and said softly, "Headmaster Chen instructed us not to abandon or give up. Not a single person can be left behind." Senior Apprentice Brother Su didn't expect Zhang Xiaohua to say this and couldn't help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. Seeing this, Lu Chaoxian rolled his eyes and stepped forward. "Senior Apprentice Brother Su, it's humid here and there are many wild beasts. Even if we leave Senior Apprentice Brother Wong here, won't his body be trampled on? Why don't we put him in the car first and properly bury him when we get out of the forest and into the mountains ahead?" Senior Apprentice Brother Su was no fool. When he saw Lu Chaoxian handing him a ladder, he immediately stepped down and glared fiercely at Zhang Xiaohua. "Hey," Deputy Hall Master Su said clearly when he mobilized everyone to listen to his orders. "Your ice soul grass hasn't even been found yet, and you're already thinking of going against my Bai Yefeng people. I like to see how Chan Fengxiao will explain this to the hall master when we get back. Then he looked at senior apprentice Brother Wang, whose face was already covered in black gas, and said with disgust, "Those bitten by the five-colored snake will have their bodies festered in less than an hour. The stench will assail our nostrils. Don't dirty our carriage." Then he swept a glance at the disciples who were watching at the side and shouted loudly, "What are you looking at? Hurry up and leave. Let's see how you can escape when the carnivorous beasts come." The disciples didn't dare to be negligent. They quickly jumped into the carriages and followed the team in front of them. The guards of the Wuming Hall just watched from the side and didn't say anything. When they saw the team moving, they also turned their horses around and followed the team forward. Even the disciple of Wuming Hall who saw the five-colored snake flying towards senior brother Wang and only chopped off the latter half of the snake's body with his sword, leaving the former half of the snake's body intact, shrugged his shoulders. He didn't look guilty at all and just walked forward with the team. After all, he had done what he should do. If the disciple of the pill-expanding hall was bitten again, it could only be his bad luck. It had nothing to do with him if he lost his life. Seeing that everyone had left, Zhang Xiaohua said to Lu Chaoxian, "Senior apprentice brother Lu, you go to the back of the car and we'll follow. It's inconvenient for senior apprentice brother Wang to move, so I'll stay in this car." Then she said to the disciple who was driving the car, "You can drive the car. It doesn't have to be too slow. It just needs to be stable." The disciple seemed to wake up from a dream and immediately nodded like a chick pecking rice. Okay, Junior brother Ren, I'll listen to you. Can you do it?" Lu Chaoxian next to him was also puzzled. "Junior brother Ren, alas, forget it. Man proposes, God disposes. Let's do our best." Junior apprentice brother Wang seems to be. Seeing that junior apprentice brother Wang was no longer angry, Lu Chaoxian didn't know how to persuade Zhang Xiaohua, who wanted to save him. He just quickly walked back to the last carriage and drove it to catch up with the team. Zhang Xiaohua hugged senior apprentice brother Wang's body and sat in the carriage. He stretched out his finger and skillfully pressed several major acupoints next to his heart to prevent the poison from attacking his heart. In fact, when he was feeling his pulse, Zhang Xiaohua had already sent his true qi into senior apprentice brother Wang's meridians and firmly protected his heart meridians. Otherwise, he wouldn't have wasted time with senior apprentice brother Su. Although the black qi on senior apprentice brother Wang's face was thicker now, in fact, there was no change in his heart meridians. Zhang Xiaohua took out a bottle of pills from his arms. It was the detoxification pill that he had refined himself. He had never used this pill himself, so he didn't have any confidence. However, he heard from Lu Chaoxian that the detoxification pill refined by the pill department in the past could cure the poison of the five-colored snake. Although the snake's poison was powerful now, the pills refined by his own immortal method might not be useless. Of course, the most important thing was that Zhang Xiaohua wouldn't watch a living life die in front of his eyes. Even if there was a glimmer of hope, he was willing to try. Senior apprentice brother Wang's mouth was stiff and couldn't open. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to use force, so he had to remove his chin. He threw a detoxification pill into his mouth and then put his chin back on. This kind of method of taking medicine was really rare. Then, Zhang Xiaohua put his finger on senior apprentice brother Wang's chin and sent true qi over. He urged the detoxification pill that entered his body to dissolve the medicine and then sent it to all parts of his body. Sure enough, not long after, the black qi on senior apprentice brother Wang's face slowly disappeared. The sweet fragrance in his breath also disappeared. His chest gradually rose and fell. It should be that the snake's poison in his body was being eliminated. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. According to the method he learned from Rejuvenation Valley's Qi Huang courtyard, he used his true qi to force the remaining snake's poison in senior apprentice brother Wang's injured right leg bit by bit. The right leg that was bitten just now was abnormally swollen due to the poison. It was twice as big as before, black and shiny. Now that the snake's poison was about to be removed, the swelling was still the same, but the color had turned gray. Zhang Xiaohua put senior apprentice brother Wang's right leg outside the carriage. His right hand's finger made a cut. With a chi sound, a smelly and fishy black liquid shot out from the leg. Once it landed on the flowers and plants on the ground, it immediately corroded the flowers and plants with a chi la sound. Then, where Zhang Xiaohua made a cut, some pus still flowed out. The wound on senior apprentice Brother Wang's leg, under the pressure of Zhang Xiaohua's true chi, also continued to bleed out some black blood. After a while, the blood gradually turned red, and his leg gradually returned to normal. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua lightly tapped a few more times to seal the acupoints on his leg to stop the bleeding. Then, she laid senior apprentice Brother Wang flat in the carriage. She walked out of the carriage and stood behind the disciple driving the carriage. When the disciple driving the carriage heard Zhang Xiaohua coming out, he said sadly, "Junior Brother Run, I'm afraid senior apprentice Brother Wang is dying. It doesn't matter. We all know your intentions. I thank you on behalf of senior apprentice Brother Wang." Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, "Senior apprentice Brother Li, you seem to lack confidence in me." "What? Junior Brother Run, you actually—" Senior apprentice Brother Li couldn't help but cry out. At this time, senior apprentice Brother Wang in the carriage also made a weak sound. "Ouch, it hurts so much. Water, I want to drink water." Senior apprentice Brother Wang. Senior apprentice Brother Li couldn't bear it anymore. He stopped the horse and turned around. He took the water bag from the carriage and was about to feed senior apprentice Brother Wang water. The nearby carriages were also happy to hear this. They all stopped and gathered in front of the carriage, wanting to see if senior apprentice Brother Wang really came back to life. Even the disciples of Wuming Hall who were guarding at the side looked over curiously. Seeing the carriage at the rear stop, senior apprentice Brother Su, who was leading the group, had to run over and scolded, "What are you doing? One just died, and now we're stopping?" Chapter 6:27. A disciple next to him said softly that Senior Brother Su, Senior Brother Wang, is not dead. He was saved by Junior Brother Ren. "What?" Senior Brother Su said in disbelief. "How is that possible? I've seen his face before. He's dead for sure. If you don't believe me, take a look for yourself." Senior Brother Su pushed through the crowd and saw Senior Brother Wang leaning against the side of the carriage. At that moment, Senior Brother Wang had basically returned to his original state. However, his face was pale and his lips were dry. Senior Brother Su walked to the front of the carriage in disbelief. He carefully looked at Senior Brother Wang's eyes and smelled his breath. He said in disbelief, "Junior Brother Wang, do you still feel uncomfortable?" "Thank you for your concern, Senior Brother Su. I just feel weak and my legs still hurt a little. Nothing else." "Oh, that's good. Have a good rest in the carriage. We'll be arriving at the strange birch forest the day after tomorrow. If you're still not feeling well, don't tire yourself out. I'll report your situation to Deputy Hall Master Su. I hope he'll be merciful." "Thank you, Senior Brother. Please put in a good word for me." Then, Senior Brother Su turned around and asked, "Junior Brother Ren, what's going on? What did you do?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "I didn't do anything. I just gave Senior Brother Wang another detoxification pill." Detoxification pill. Can I have a look?" "I'm sorry, Senior Brother Su." Zhang Xiaohua rejected him without hesitation. "I won that from a bet. There's only one left. I've already given it to Senior Brother Wang. I don't have any more on me." Senior Brother Su was furious. He was almost certain that Zhang Xiaohua would not cooperate. He had to admit that his feeling was extremely accurate. Zhang Xiaohua continued to spread her hands and said, "Also, I don't know which senior brother lost to me. There are about 1,000 senior brothers in Timu Peak. If Senior Brother Su wants to know, I'll tell you after I ask them one by one." Senior Brother Su pointed at Zhang Xiaohua, not knowing what to say. At this moment, they suddenly heard a commotion in front of them. When everyone looked up, they saw a group of disciples raising their heads and pointing at the top of the forest. Above them, there was a group of animals that looked like humans and monkeys. They were climbing the trees and moving forward. "Human-faced monkey?" Senior Brother Su blurted out. "It is indeed the human-faced monkey. Ha ha, this is a gift from the heavens." The disciples of the Wuming Hall who were watching the fun cheered. Senior Brother Chun, who was leading the team, smiled and said, "Junior Brother Sue, now that we have reached the edge of the forest, there are no major obstacles ahead. Your Pill Expansion Hall's team can go ahead first. Our brothers of the Wombing Hall need to warm up with the human-faced monkey. Please forgive us." After that, he put his finger in his mouth and whistled before Senior Brother Sue could say anything. All the disciples of the Wombing Hall drew their swords and jumped up from their horses. They used their lightness skill to chase after the human-faced monkey on the tree. When a human-faced monkey on the tree saw that someone was chasing after it, it immediately panicked and screamed and fled in all directions. Seeing that the Wombing Hall disciple had abandoned him, Senior Brother Sue's face was filled with anger. However, there was nothing he could do. When he turned around and saw that Zhang Xiaohua was ignoring him, the anger in his heart grew. However, the forest was dangerous, and he did not dare to stay for long. He shouted, "Are all of you stupid? What are you looking at? Hurry up and go. The outer disciples have left. If we don't hurry up, are we going to be bitten to death by the five-colored snake?" After that, he ignored the crowd and went back to the front of the team, ordering the disciples to hurry up. The disciples behind did not have time to watch the fun. They quickly got on their horses and wanted to get out of the forest as soon as possible. Seeing that Senior Brother Wang was fine, Zhang Xiaohua went back to her car. Looking at the disciples of the Wombing Hall who were leaving, she asked, "What's wrong with the human-faced monkey? Why are all the senior brothers of the Wombing Hall like this? As if they saw beauty? Beauty?" Lu Chaoxian swallowed his saliva and said, "How can they be compared with the beauty? It's just that these human-faced monkeys are the most suitable hunting targets for the disciples of the Wombing Hall." "Oh, I see. Last time I heard Senior Brother Lu Lihong talk about the ferocious beasts refined by Yulan Mu. Why didn't I hear him talk about this?" Lu Chaoxian smiled and said, "Although Senior Brother Lu is lucky and is a blessing, he was still a disciple of the Pill Expanding Hall last time. He didn't bring good luck to the Wombing Hall, so it's normal that he didn't encounter the human-faced monkey. You don't know, Junior Brother Rin. I heard from the outer disciples that the human-faced monkey is extremely agile and its claws are sharp. It won't be at a disadvantage when facing an ordinary outer disciple. It seems that the points of the outer disciples in the trial are very high. Think about it. The points of the Piang and the elk are too low. Even the pig is not enough. Although the points of the blood wolf and the thunder tiger are high, several people have to fight together and the points have to be divided after the battle. How can they be more suitable than the human-faced monkey? It's the points that they are good at." Then he said mysteriously, "Moreover, the cubs of the human-faced monkey are the most intelligent. If they are properly trained, they will understand human nature. The inner disciples of the lingering fragrance peak like them the most. If they can catch one and teach it to the lingering fragrance peak to please a disciple, it will be a great benefit. Think about it. Who doesn't want to do something that can earn points and make extra money? This is also their luck. It's estimated that Senior Brother Lu brought them here. Usually, the human-faced monkey can't be seen. While they were talking, there were screams coming from the distance. It was the shrill screams of the human-faced monkey. Presumably, the disciples of the Wombing Hall were on a killing spree to earn points and make a future for themselves. The lives of the human-faced monkeys. Zhang Xiaohua listened to the screams and couldn't bear it. Unfortunately, what could he do? Maybe he could only sigh. Thunder Tiger ate the disciples of the Wombing Hall, and now the Wombing Hall killed the human-faced monkeys. Everyone should do what they needed. Without the protection of the disciples of the Wombing Hall, the team of the Pill Expanding Hall seemed to lack a sense of security. They didn't dare to stop for a while and hurried out. Soon after sunset, they broke out of the rainforest. Fortunately, they didn't encounter any ferocious beasts or abnormal rain. Coming out of the rainforest, there was an unusually tall mountain range in front of them. There were rugged mountain roads leading to the inside of the mountain range. The team of the Pill Expanding Hall went forward for a long time before they came to the front of the mountain range and stopped. It was the place where they would camp tonight. The horses of the disciples of the Wombing Hall came out with the team of the Pill Expanding Hall and followed beside them. Tonight's campsite was the same as the first night. It was a cave dug into the mountain wall according to local conditions. It was just that the caves here were abnormally sparse and arranged irregularly on the mountain. Just by using his divine sense, he could see that the caves were very shallow and could only accommodate one person to rest. Jumping off the carriage, before Zhang Xiaohua could say anything, she saw Senior Brother Wang, who was in the front carriage, walk over with difficulty with the help of Senior Brother Li, who was driving the carriage. Zhang Xiaohua hurried forward and supported him. Senior Brother Wang's face was full of gratitude. He held Zhang Xiaohua's hand and said, "Junior Brother Ren, Junior Brother Li has just told me that he is really grateful for Junior Brother Ren's righteousness. If it weren't for Junior Brother, I would be a pile of rotten meat in the orchid rainforest now. I can't repay you for saving my life." Zhang Xiaohua supported him and said with a smile, "Senior Brother Wang is too polite. You and I are senior brother. I know that I can save your life. So how can I let you die there casually? If we were in different positions, I think Senior Brother would also lend a helping hand. That's right. As long as there is a glimmer of hope, I won't let go." Senior Brother Wang was hesitant at first, but then he said resolutely. Hearing Senior Brother Wang's tone, Zhang Xiaohua secretly laughed. This matter was easy to say, but to do it was difficult. If there was really only one detoxification pill, when knowing that there would be a 5-colored snake attack, this detoxification pill was equivalent to a life. Anyone would consider it. However, did our Zhang Xiaohua only have one pill? Therefore, there was no need to put Zhang Xiaohua in the furnace of conscience to interrogate her. Zhang Xiaohua said again, "Senior Brother Wang's body is still weak because the snake venom has just been removed. I heard that the two of you will be able to reach the strange birch forest tomorrow. Senior Brother, you should rest more these 2 days. I think you will have to work hard at that time." At this time, the other 6 disciples also came over and said, "Fortunately, we are with Junior Brother Ren. Otherwise, Senior Brother Wang would be miserable. Senior Brother Wang, don't worry. Since we are already in a group, when we reach the strange birch forest, we will still work together. Even if your body is not good, you still have us, right?" "That's right. It's all thanks to Junior Brother Ren. If it was any other group, our lives would have flown to the sky." The disciples were very glad. Of course, at the foot of the White Mountain Peak, there was no love for the new and hate the old. While they were talking, the horses of the Wuming Hall neighed. All the disciples turned around and saw a group of people using Qing Gong from the orchid rainforest. The disciples of the Tuo Dan Hall couldn't help but show an envious look in their eyes. When the disciples of the Wuming Hall came closer, Zhang Xiaohua saw clearly that each disciple was holding a bloody monkey tail in their hands. There were also faint bloodstains on their bodies, but their faces showed faint excitement. Some of the disciples were even very happy. They were holding a fist-sized monkey in their hands that seemed to have not opened its eyes yet. Zhang Xiaohua was sad. Not to mention these little monkeys that were just born. Each of the disciples of the Wuming Hall had about 5 or 6 monkey tails in their hands. That was 600 human-faced monkeys. In the time it took to eat 2 meals, they were all hunted down. Presumably, these human-faced monkeys didn't expect that passing through the orchid rainforest would bring about an unexpected disaster. Congratulations, congratulations. The leader of the Pill Expanding Hall, Senior Brother Su, went up to greet the leader of the Wuming Hall, Senior Brother Chun. Senior Brother Chun was also carrying a little monkey in his hand. With a smile on his face, he said, "Congratulations to you too. Didn't we borrow Junior Brother Su's luck? I'm sure that once we reach the strange birch forest, Junior Brother Su will also have a huge harvest. Hee, this is all due to Senior Brother Chen's luck. Hopefully, this luck will bring us some benefits," Senior Brother Su said humbly. Looking at the two of them taking pictures of each other, Zhang Xiaohua grew impatient. She raised her eyes to look at the rainforest behind her. Suddenly, her heart palpitated. Chapter 628. In the easternmost part of the Yulon Grand Canyon, under a gentle slope, there was a bonfire crackling and burning. 2 women were casually sitting on the grass beside the bonfire. One was wearing a green palace dress with a veil on her face, while the other was wearing a purple palace dress. She was holding a branch and roasting something on the bonfire. It was Chun Chun and Zixia. Smelling the aroma gradually emitting from a bonfire, Chun Chun smacked her lips and asked without any ladle-like image, I say, Junior Sister Zixia, I didn't expect your barbecue skills to be so good. Even Martial Uncle Jing Xian doesn't know how to do it. Where did you learn it? Could it be that the burning of the zither and cooking of the crane on Lingxiang Peak was done by you? Zixia's face showed a hint of sadness. She shook her head and said, Senior Sister Chun, I don't know. Maybe I knew how to do it before I lost my memory. Then what did you remember these years? Is it because your family found you a young husband or an old rich man that you ran away from home? Then you met with an accident and lost your memory? Or did you elope with your childhood sweetheart? Halfway there, you encountered robbers who wanted to take you away as a mistress. You would rather die than submit and jumped off the cliff. Was that why Martial Uncle Jing Xian saved you? Sweat, Zixia's face turned red again. She carefully turned the branch in her hand and calmly replied, Senior Sister, you must be joking. I have been racking my brains for a while. When my master was alive, he often treated my head, but it was still to no avail. I know nothing about things that happened before I was 12 years old. Perhaps I was an orphan who wandered in the mountains. How could there be childhood sweethearts and childhood sweethearts? Sigh, seeing Zixia so calm, but her tone was filled with endless worry. Chun Chun couldn't help but sigh. For a moment, on the slope, there was only the crackling of the bonfire and the silence of dusk. After a long while, Zixia handed the things on the branch to Chun Chun and said, Senior Sister, you eat first. Chun Chun didn't refuse and took one of them. She said, I alone am enough. Zixia didn't hold back and very naturally took it back. She said somewhat enviously, I heard that Senior Sister's mortal mantra is the most powerful. Almost all of them can be used for fasting. Anidia? Chun Chun was stunned and said, How do you know this word? Zixia thought for a moment and said, I'm not sure. It should be my master who told me. Oh, it should be. Martial Uncle Jing Xian is very powerful. Chun Chun nodded and said, However, I'm not fasting. I'm just trying to lose weight. Clang! Zixia steadied herself and picked up the things that had fallen from the ground. She asked weakly, Senior Martial Sister's figure is already very good. You don't have to do this, right? Chun Chun ate the food on the branch in one bite. She was not satisfied, but she forced herself to burp and said complacently, Prepare for a rainy day. Haven't you seen how many heartless people have abandoned their wives and children for the sake of beauty since ancient times? I have to be prepared in advance. Zixia wiped the non-existent sweat on her face and said helplessly, Well, Senior Martial Sister is knowledgeable and indeed amazing. Chun Chun felt very comfortable with this flattery. She took out a small porcelain bottle from her arms and opened the lid. A fragrance came out of the bottle. Seeing this, Zixia asked, By the way, Senior Martial Sister Chun, this heaven stalactite milk seems to be taken when practicing at night. If you take it now, you have to adjust your breath immediately. I'm afraid it's not convenient here. Chun Chun said with a smile, Of course I know this. I'm just overjoyed and took it out to admire. Zixia was speechless again and could only eat by herself. Chun Chun said again, That Car's Cave is a good place. Why haven't I heard about it from the previous Senior Martial Sisters? If Junior Martial Sister Zixia hadn't seen it by chance, we would have missed this millennium-old stalactite milk. I didn't expect that Chun Chun, would have such good luck one day. By the way, Junior Martial Sister Zixia, don't be jealous. It's not that I don't want to give it to you as your Senior Martial Sister, but your current cultivation is really too low. If this stalactite milk enters your body, there might be some changes. Wait for me to give it to the hierarch and ask her to make a decision. Zixia smiled. Senior Sister Chun, what are you talking about? Although I was the one who discovered the cave. If it wasn't for Senior Sister Chun accompanying me and exterminating the blood night bats in the cave, how could I have safely obtained the sky stalactite with my skills? However, this stalactite milk can only be taken one drop at a time. Senior Marshal sister, don't be greedy. Otherwise, the consequences will be very serious. Chen Shun was startled for a moment and said, perhaps. This thing is really rare, and I've only occasionally seen it in books. Its usage is also unknown. If it wasn't for, junior sister, I wouldn't have taken it here. Zixia pursed her lips and smiled. Senior Marshal sister Chun, don't worry. I don't know anything. Good junior Marshal sister. With your words, I'm relieved. Chun said with a sinister smile, in the future, if you take a fancy to any disciple, don't hesitate to tell me. I don't care if he has a good match or not. I'll make the decision for you. Bang! Zixia disappeared. At this moment, a bolt of lightning shot from the distance and rushed toward the jade bottle in Chen Chen's hand. However, when the lightning was 3 feet away from Chen Chen, he suddenly raised his head and raised his hand. A cold light flashed in his hand and directly chopped toward the lightning. Clang! Chen Chen's body swayed, and the cold light in his hand was revealed. It was a soft sword that looked like a peacock. The lightning was also blocked and was bluntly sent flying back by the soft sword. When its figure was revealed in the air, it was actually a huge eagle with black feathers, iron claws, and a sharp golden beak. The eagle sat cross-legged and circled in the air. Then it dived down and flew toward Chen Chen. Golden eagle? Chen Chen was surprised for a moment. Then he became happy and said, I was wondering why I didn't see any powerful beasts in the Yulon Grand Canyon. I didn't expect to meet you here. After he finished speaking, he put away the jade bottle containing the heaven stalactite into his bosom and leaped into the air. He actually raised his flexible sword and stabbed at the golden eagle that was charging past him. It must be said that the martial arts of Chuanxiang cult were extremely powerful. Although Chen Chen couldn't fly in the air like Zhang Xiaohua, he could stay in the air for a very long time. It was almost comparable to the levitation technique. However, the golden eagle was extremely fast and its beak was sharp. After fighting for a while, it seemed that the eagle couldn't split its attention. However, seeing that the stalactite had been put away, the golden eagle who was caught off guard decided to retreat. It turned around and dodged the soft sword. Then, it rushed into the dark night sky and headed east. Chen Chen's figure landed on the ground. He didn't say anything and pulled Zixia, who was watching the battle, from the side. Then, he flew again and followed the golden eagle on the ground. Zixia operated the internal energy in her meridians and tried her best to use her qigong. While reducing Chen Chen's burden, she asked, Senior sister, it's already dark. Why are we still chasing the golden eagle? Chen Chen's qigong was also very good. Even though he was in the air, he could still speak freely. He said, You don't know that this golden eagle has a hobby. Its nest has always been built on cliffs with spiritual herbs. If we follow this golden eagle, we will be able to gain a good harvest. I didn't kill the eagle just now because of this reason. If we don't chase now, when will we? Zixia suddenly understood. She tightened her small mouth and followed Chen Chen's figure. Not to mention that Chen Chen and Zixia had chased the golden eagle into the depths of the forest. Zhang Xiaohua stood behind the carriage and looked into the forest. The dense forest was still the same as before, like a ferocious beast lying there quietly, making people shudder. His divine sense swept over the forest and found that it was normal. However, Zhang Xiaohua knew that now that her divine awareness had a new divine awareness, the throbbing in her heart must have a reason. Although she was not sure what caused it, she was sure that it would be unfavorable to her. But when she saw that the disciples of the Wombing Hall were almost too excited and the disciples of the Pill-Opening Hall came to greet them, Zhang Xiaohua sensibly closed her mouth. The resting cave was dug in the mountain wall. The disciples of the Wombing Hall naturally occupied the upper level, and the disciples of the Pill-Opening Hall were at the lower level. Zhang Xiaohua and the other 8 people found several caves in the corner and stayed there. When Senior Brother Wang saw Zhang Xiaohua, he thanked her profusely, which made Zhang Xiaohua a little embarrassed. Lu Chaoxian and the others started a bonfire next to the cave. Everyone sat in a circle and sighed about the dangers of the day. A few disciples who were competing with them secretly glanced at them, as if they wanted to get closer. After all, Zhang Xiaohua had saved Senior Brother Wang today, and they still remembered it. After a short while, the sky was completely dark. Everyone went back to the cave to sleep, leaving some disciples of the Wuming Hall to patrol. Zhang Xiaohua and others also went back early. Just before entering the cave, Zhang Xiaohua repeatedly told them that it might be dangerous at night, and no matter what happened outside, they should not come out. Lu Chaoxian and the others were very surprised when they heard this, but they still nodded honestly and promised to sleep until the next morning. Zhang Xiaohua also fulfilled her responsibility as a leader. When it was almost midnight, she quietly came out and sealed the cave entrance of her and the other 9 people's cave with a restriction formation. This restriction formation prohibited entry and exit. As long as they listened to her and hid in the cave to sleep, even if the 5-colored snake came again, it could not hurt them. As for the other disciples of the pill opening hall, even if Zhang Xiaohua wanted to, she was powerless. So, she had to sweep the snow in front of her door first. After doing these things, Zhang Xiaohua returned to her cave and took out the primordial stones to start her daily routine practice. The night was dark, and the whole mountain fell into a deep sleep. Only a few disciples of the Wuming Hall were walking around and patrolling the surroundings from time to time. However, in the distance, in the darkness, a pair of eyes filled with hatred stared at those disciples. Then, it nimbly flashed into the night and disappeared without a trace. Chapter 629. The next day, Zhang Xiaohua opened his eyes. The first thing he did was to release his divine sense to see what had happened outside. However, after scanning for a long time, he found that those who were sleeping were still sleeping, and those who were patrolling were still patrolling. There was nothing different from last night. Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself, "Am I wrong? Yes, you're right. As long as everyone is safe, isn't it better than anything else?" She removed the inhibition at the entrance of the cave and quietly walked out of the cave. She removed the inhibition at the entrances of other people's caves as well. Then she walked out of the cave and came to an open space. Ignoring the stares of the patrolling disciples, she began to practice her Big Dipper magical fist. Although Zhang Xiaohua's Big Dipper magical fist was a combination of hardness and softness, she was still despised by the disciples of Wuming Hall. Looking from afar, they curled their lips slightly. This boxing skill was obviously an external cultivation method and had nothing to do with internal strength. How could it catch the attention of the outer core disciples who often practiced internal strength? Moreover, there were only so many moves in a set of boxing skill. She practiced it over and over again. After practicing it for 2 or 3 times, the disciples of Wuming Hall were no longer interested in her. Even Lu Lihong, who got up later, just glanced at her for a while, shook his head, and did his own morning lesson. When the sun rose, all the disciples stood up and fed the horses that pulled the carriages, packed up their things, and the Pill Tower Hall's carriages were about to set out again. Senior Brother Wang, who was poisoned yesterday, seemed to have recovered after a night's rest, but his face was still a little pale. Lu Chaoxian, who was in the carriage, turned back from time to time to ask Zhang Xiaohua who he won the detoxification pill from. Seeing it was better than hearing it 100 times. The detoxification effect was really good. Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, "I already said yesterday that I didn't get the pill by myself. Senior Brother Bai Huan and other senior brothers helped me. There are so many disciples on Tianmu Peak. How could I know who won?" Lu Chaoxian thought about it and found it was true. He also knew that some pills used by inner core disciples were often spread out in the pill opening hall. Some were often mistaken by the disciples of pill opening hall and treated as ordinary pills. The pill that saved Senior Brother Wang yesterday might belong to this category. Then he stopped asking. Not long after, the car turned into a mountain road and gradually climbed up along the winding path. Zhang Xiaohua sat in the car and looked at the scenery outside the window. She asked casually, "Senior Brother Lu, what's the name of this mountain?" Lu Chaoxian was also used to Zhang Xiaohua's ignorance, so he said, This is Hansue Ridge, which should be connected to the Orchid Mountain Range. This section stretches for hundreds of miles, and both sides are not easy to pass through. We can only go over the mountain from here. Then, he cracked the whip in his hand and urged the carriage to avoid a large rock. He continued, "Don't underestimate this Chui Mountain Range just because it's not high, but the area it covers is not small. In addition, the mountain path is difficult to traverse. Just crossing the mountain range alone will take a day. However, this is the last part of the journey. After crossing the mountain range, we will reach the strange birch forest." Oh, using 3 or 4 days to reach the strange birch forest is considered fast. I thought it would take at least 5 or 6 days. Lu Chaoxian looked at the continuous mountain range and said, "The journey to the strange birch forest is considered the shortest." I heard from the seniors in the hall that 300 years ago, our pill expanding hall's herbs were located in the northeast. I think it was called the Eagle Stream Gorge. It takes 10 days to go there and 20 days to go back and forth. We only have less than 10 days left to pick herbs. Moreover, since the journey is longer, we will encounter more dangers. Compared to the seniors, we are much more fortunate. Zhang Xiaowan nodded and smiled. What about the disciples of Wuming Hall? Did they change the place where they train? Lu Chaoxian scratched his head and said, "I don't know. When the outer disciples send us to the strange birch forest, they will go to the place where they train. When we finish picking herbs, they will also finish their training and return to the strange birch forest to join us. As for where they will train, how do we know?" Zhang Xiaowa was just curious. Since Lu Chaoxian didn't know, she didn't ask anymore. She closed her eyes and sat in the carriage to comprehend the array. Although the mountain path in the Chui Mountain Range was rugged and often bumpy, and there were many stones on the road, it was really not easy to walk. The carriage traveled for half a day, and the sun was already high up in the sky. Looking back, they didn't seem to have gone far from the place where they started. Although the mountain path was difficult to walk on, the disciples walked happily. This place was not like the Orchid Prairie, nor was it like the Orchid Rainforest. There were no fierce beasts here. Occasionally, there were several fierce vultures and eagles, but they just hovered above their heads for a few times, and then spread their wings and flew away. There was no sign of difficulty. The disciples of the Pill Tower Hall and Wuming Hall already knew that this place was safe, so they were very relaxed. A few bold ones even opened their voices and sang a folk song. The leading disciple wanted to control them, but when he thought of the previous day's fright, he gave up the idea and squinted his eyes to appreciate it. After a while, it was noon, and the sun gradually became a little fierce. At this time, the carriages traveled to a real canyon. The canyon was very narrow and could only accommodate 2 carriages side by side. The disciples of Wuming Hall had to form a pair with the Pill Tower Hall's carriages, and 1 horse and 1 carriage alternately moved forward. When Zhang Xiaohua's last carriage entered the canyon, the sun just reached the top of everyone's head. Zhang Xiaohua walked out of the carriage and looked up at the sky above her head. There was only a line of sky left, and there were towering mountain walls on both sides. She couldn't help but sigh. "Senior brother Lu, this canyon is very steep. It is really a line of sky." "Huh? Junior brother doesn't know anything, does he? How'd he know the name Line of Sky?" Lu Chaoxian was very surprised. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and was about to answer. Suddenly, there was a sudden shock in her heart, and she blurted out, "Senior brother Lu, be careful. This canyon is so steep before this came out, there was a burst of crashing sound in front of them, followed by the sound of rocks falling to the ground, the sound of rocks smashing the carriages, followed by the neighing of horses and the screams of injured disciples. Looking up at the top of the Line of Sky Canyon, there were flickering figures. Huge rocks rolled down from the top of the canyon, and the soil was raised high. Zhang Xiaohua's face was shocked. The canyon's terrain was special. It was very easy to fall rocks from a high place, but it was not easy for people to dodge in the canyon, especially so many disciples, carriages, and horses. They could only watch as they were smashed to death. Fortunately, no matter whether it was the disciples of the Pill Expanding Hall, they were all selected. Even if their martial arts were far inferior to the outer disciples, it was not too difficult to dodge the falling rocks. At the beginning, a few disciples were accidentally killed, and then they began to jump to avoid the falling rocks. However, the mountain path in the canyon was narrow. Even if their skills were extraordinary, after all, the space to move was limited. It was fine for a short period of time, but as time went by, it was difficult to escape the misfortune. Therefore, the disciples in front quickly rushed out of the canyon. If the disciples of the pill-expanding hall were like this, needless to say, the outer disciples of the woming hall were even more so. Seeing that the situation was critical and the carriages were destroyed, blocking the way forward, they immediately dismounted their horses, jumped up, and used their lightness skill to rush out. At this time, there were a few loud boom sounds, and several huge rocks fell from a high place in front of the canyon, blocking the way out. Seeing this, everyone turned pale with fright. The disciples of the woming hall were fine, and they could use their lightness skill to get out, but the disciples of the pill-expanding hall were as pale as ashes. The disciples who were walking in front of the canyon ran forward, and the disciples who were walking at the back naturally had to quickly retreat out of the canyon. Needless to say, how could the carriages be freely turned around in a short time? Only the disciples jumped off the carriages and ran desperately to the back. The outer disciples at the back, such as Lu Li Hong, saw the sudden tragedy in front of them. At first, they were shocked, but then they came to their senses. Looking at the steep stone walls around them, they knew that they did not have superior lightness skill to climb to the top of the mountain. So they immediately retreated from the canyon, and each of them looked for a place to climb up and used their lightness skill to go up the mountain. Zhang Xiaohua had just reminded Lu Chaoxian to be careful, as the falling rocks were in front of them. He knew that the terrain of the canyon was dangerous, so he did not dare to delay. He was the last carriage, and there were two outer disciples behind him. He immediately jumped off from the back of the carriage and quickly ran out of the canyon. At this time, the two outer disciples were still stunned at what was happening in front of them and did not have time to pay attention to him. Zhang Xiaohua came out of the canyon, dodged to one side, and immediately used the Imperial Wind technique to fly straight to the top of the mountain. When the outer disciples ran out of the canyon and looked up, he had already made an incantation and escaped into the mountain. Not long after, he appeared on the top of the mountain. He saw that on the top of the mountain, there were more than 10 things that looked like monkeys and humans. A human-faced monkey was jumping up and down and screaming, and they were working together to push down the rocks. When Zhang Xiaohua came up, they had just pushed down a few huge rocks and were about to go to Zhang Xiaohua. The place where Zhang Xiaohua came up was the end of the canyon, where there were also several huge rocks. Seeing the human-faced monkey, Zhang Xiaohua immediately understood that this was the survivor of the human-faced monkeys that were killed by the disciples of Woming Hall yesterday. And this human-faced monkey thing that looked twice as tall as himself must be the helpers of the human-faced monkeys for revenge. This should be the reason why he was vigilant last night. Alas, this retribution came too fast. Zhang Xiaohua sighed and looked at the rocks next to him. If they really pushed the rocks down, the casualties of the outer sect disciples would not be too great. Basically, none of the disciples of the pill-sprouting hall would be able to make it out of this place alive. Moreover, the canyon was surrounded by steep rocks. It was extremely difficult to climb up using Qigong. By the time the outer sect disciples found a suitable place, the mountain rocks would have been pushed down. Perhaps the human-faced monkey and the others would have already clapped their claws and succeeded in their revenge. Chapter 630. Seeing the human-faced monkey jumping up and down in the distance, pointing at him and the monkey-like thing and saying something, Zhang Xiaohua touched his nose and shook his head secretly. He strongly disapproved of the Woming Hall's action of slaughtering the human-faced monkey yesterday, but he could not let the human-faced monkey smash the disciples of the pill-sprouting hall to death in the canyon. The human-faced monkey's revenge might be justified, but since he had encountered it, he could only stop it. At this moment, the human-faced monkey had already understood the human-faced monkey's intentions. A few of them continued to throw rocks into the canyon, while the others fiercely charged towards Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua did not hesitate. He took out Chasing Dream from his bosom and threw it into the air. The small sword chirped happily and quickly flew towards them. The human-faced monkey and the other wild beasts had never seen such a scene before. They raised their huge palms and used all their strength to slap the small sword. Chasing Dream was like a nimble little bird. It dodged with a twist and seemed to ignore them. It went straight for the wild beasts that were using all their strength to push the rocks in the distance. With a poochie sound, Chasing Dream nimbly pierced through the palm of a wild beast. Then, without stopping, it pierced through the huge mountain rock and came out from the other side, piercing through another palm. That wild beast howled in pain, holding its bleeding palms and jumping around. However, that small sword did not stop at all and continued to attack another wild beast. In just a moment, those few wild beasts that had stayed behind and wanted to push the mountain rock down the canyon had their hands pierced through by the small sword. They stood there in pain, their shoulders twitching. How could they still be able to do anything? The wild beasts that were charging toward Zhang Xiaohua were surprised when they saw the small sword fly away. They did not stop and continued to charge toward Zhang Xiaohua. However, the screams behind them stopped them. When they saw the injuries of the wild beasts, they could not help but take a few steps back with fear in their eyes. At this moment, the small sword that had succeeded in its mission whistled past their heads. With a clever circle, it stopped in front of them. The tip of the sword trembled up and down, facing the mountain wind as if it was provoking them. Voila! The dozen or so wild beasts took a step back at the same time, as if they had no idea what to do. They all looked at the human-faced monkey beside them. Although the human-faced monkey was also afraid, its eyes still flashed with hatred. It could not tell whether Zhang Xiaohua was among the humans who slaughtered its people yesterday. It was chirping and screaming again. It even jumped up and down and patted its chest, causing the few wild beasts to want to go forward but not dare to, hesitating. The human-faced monkey seemed to be impatient. It screamed a few times and stood up. With a whoosh, it rushed into the air and pounced at Zhang Xiaohua. Alas, I was eager for revenge, but I was blinded by hatred. Zhang Xiaohua sighed. He had released Chasing Dream, and everything within a radius of 10 feet was under his divine sense. He had already seen the human-faced monkey's actions clearly. Moreover, the human-faced monkey was the most suitable hunting target for outer sect disciples. To Zhang Xiaohua, even if he did not have divine sense, there was absolutely no suspense. Hence, Zhang Xiaohua only stood there quietly without any thoughts of dodging. That human-faced monkey leapt into the air, but it had made many plans. When it arrived in front of Zhang Xiaohua, seeing that Zhang Xiaohua still did not move, it was already bursting with joy. With a wave of its two claws, it grabbed at Zhang Xiaohua's throat. Under that sunlight, the sharp claws flashed with a trace of cold light. There was no mockery in Zhang Xiaohua's eyes, nor was there a sneer. It could only pounce to a suitable distance away from the human-faced monkey. Rolling its eyes, it stared straight into its eyes. Suddenly, its left hand stretched forward and like a ghost, with a pung sound, it landed on the human-faced monkey's throat. Following that, the left hand exerted a little force. That human-faced monkey immediately had difficulty breathing and its face and ears turned red. The arm that was grabbing out no longer cared about hurting Zhang Xiaohua. It hurriedly grabbed onto Zhang Xiaohua's left hand, wanting to remove its hand from its throat. Unfortunately, even when it used all the strength in its body, that arm was still like cast copper and iron, unable to move at all. As for the human-faced monkey's strength, it was getting weaker and weaker. After a few struggles, it gradually weakened. Following that, the human-faced monkey's eyes gradually rolled back into its head, and its face that was as clean as a human face was now so red that it was about to drip blood. The two legs that were still struggling earlier were now limp and hanging down. It was not known if it had stopped struggling on its own or if it had lost all its strength. As the human-faced monkey's eyes rolled back into its head, it stared at Zhang Xiaohua. Its eyes that were initially filled with hatred turned to abnormally terrified. Following that, it became pleading, panic, and finally a flash of serenity. The 10 over large wild beasts behind the human-faced monkey saw that the human-faced monkey was caught in the air by Zhang Xiaohua. They roared angrily and were about to charge forward. However, Chasing Dream, who had stopped in front of them, swooped down magnificently and pierced through the arm of one of the beasts. A painful cry once again stopped them in their tracks. They could only watch anxiously as they howled. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua sighed. He really did not expect that these wild beasts were actually so intelligent. Other than the fact that they could not speak, how different were they from normal humans? He didn't intend to be heavy-handed in the first place. Now that he saw the ferocious beast conceding, he shook his left hand, and the human-faced monkey shot towards the huge wild beast. Seeing this, the wild beast let out a hee-hee sound and stretched out its thick arms to catch the human-faced monkey. The human-faced monkey laid in the wild beast's arm and breathed rapidly. Its face slowly regained its original color. Then, with a flip, it climbed down from the wild beast's body and glared fiercely at Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua did not show any signs of weakness and directly went forward to meet it. After looking at each other for a moment, the human-faced monkey's eyes seemed to shrink back. It blinked a few times and turned to whisper a few words to the other large beasts. The wild beasts also responded with faces full of joy. They then pulled on the human-faced monkey's slender arm, and the human-faced monkey nimbly jumped onto the large beast's shoulder. Then, the large beasts turned back and waved at Zhang Xiaohua. All of them laughed and walked towards the mountain peak. Even the injured large beasts endured the pain and followed closely behind. After walking for a few dozen steps, the human-faced monkey sitting on the large beast's shoulder turned back and looked deeply at Zhang Xiaohua. Its eyes were no longer filled with hatred, but had been replaced by gratitude. Zhang Xiaohua rubbed her eyes in disbelief. This human-faced monkey is really, alas, full of emotions. At this moment, there was a slight panting sound behind Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua did not need to turn back to know that it must be the outer disciples of Wuming Hall. She made a gesture and escaped into the mountain. The first few outer disciples who came up were those with excellent lightness skills. When they arrived at the mountain peak, they saw more than a dozen human-faced monkeys slowly retreating down the mountain peak. Seeing the human-faced monkey on the large beast's shoulder, they were immediately stunned and could not help but cry out, "Giant ape?" Although the giant ape was a close relative of the human-faced monkey, its strength was not on the same level as that of the human-faced monkey. The giant ape had thick skin and strong flesh, and it was not clumsy either. The outer core disciples of Wuming Hall could deal with the human-faced monkey with ease, but they were no match for the giant ape, even if there were 3 or 5 of them. Now that they saw more than 10 giant apes, how could they easily go forward? After waiting for a while, the number of senior and junior brothers gradually increased. The giant ape and human-faced monkey also gradually went far away. Only then did these people follow and observe. However, the entire mountain peak, except for the mountain rocks, there was nothing else. Everything was very normal. They couldn't see any traces of fighting. Occasionally, some blood spilled on the ground, but it didn't mean anything. Senior Brother Chun, who was leading the group, stood in line and carefully observed everything on the mountain peak. He could not help but gasp. The mountain peak was full of huge rocks. The rocks that were pushed down just now were to block the path in front of the canyon. If the path behind was blocked, the disciples in the canyon would have nowhere to hide. As long as the giant ape easily pushed down the remaining rocks, no one would be able to escape with their lives. Less than half of the disciples of Wuming Hall that he brought could reach the top of the mountain in time. Even if they could tie with the giant ape, they would not be able to prevent the tragedy from happening. However, the giant ape, who was confident of winning, actually left so easily. What was going on here? Senior Brother Chun scratched his head. The disciples were happy. Of course, they were happy that they did not have to risk their lives to fight with the giant ape. As for why the giant ape retreated, it was naturally because they were lucky enough to scare the giant ape away. Giant ape? This name really lives up to its name, Zhang Xiaohua said to herself. She escaped from the top of the mountain to the ground and found a place where no one would notice her. At this time, the entrance of the canyon was already in a mess. Half of the disciples of Wuming Hall went to the top of the canyon, and the rest of the disciples were shouting and organizing the disciples of Pill Expanding Hall to escape. If it were normal times, it would be easy for 300 people to get out of the canyon. But at this time, it was a matter of life and death. Who would think of anything else? There was only the word escape in their minds. They were all in a hurry and scrambled to be the first. They did not even realize that they were trampling on their fellow disciples. They just wanted to run out of the canyon as soon as possible. As a result, when everyone was in a panic, the horses were also in a panic. They could not retreat and could only move forward. People bumped into the horses, and the horses rushed at the people. For a while, the canyon was in a mess. No one knew how many disciples were killed or injured inside. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua went up early and stopped the giant ape's next move in time. The rocks above the canyon did not fall anymore. Seeing that the disciples at the entrance of the canyon were still urging the disciples in the canyon to come out quickly, Zhang Xiaohua walked behind Lu Chaoxian and whispered, "Senior brother Lu, it seems that there are no more rocks falling from the top of the canyon. I have been paying attention for a long time. Did the senior brothers of Wuming Hall go up and solve the problem?" Lu Chaoxian heard it and said in surprise, "Junior brother Ren, you came out early. I thought you were inside. Where did you go?" "Io, junior brother Ren is right. There hasn't been any mountain rocks falling down. I was so scared that I didn't notice it." Chapter 631. Then Lu Chaoxian rushed forward and shouted, "Senior brothers, don't be anxious, don't fight. There are no rocks falling from the mountain. Just come out slowly." Everyone was so anxious that they couldn't hear him. It was only after Lu Chaoxian shouted several times that they finally heard him. They all unconsciously stopped and looked up. Sure enough, there were no more rocks falling from the sky. Then, everyone slowly calmed down and became polite again. Since they had restored order and returned to the ranks of civilized people, the quality of being well-behaved was reflected. Not long after, the disciples of the Pill Tower Hall all withdrew from the canyon. Senior brother Chun, who was at the front of the team, had an ashen face and an injury on his left arm. After resting outside the canyon for a while, the outer disciples of the Wuming Hall also returned from the top of the canyon. Hearing that there was no more danger in the canyon, Senior brother Chun then organized the disciples of the Tianmu Peak who were walking behind the team to clean up the tragedy in the canyon. Zhang Xiaohua naturally volunteered. Just now, she had heard the screams from the back. When she went in, the deeper she went, the more frightened she was. The giant apes must have planned this for a long time. The rocks they threw down were huge. Although not much time had passed since Zhang Xiaohua discovered them and stopped them from throwing more rocks down, within the canyon, more than a dozen carriages had been smashed to smithereens, especially at the front of the caravan. There was some mangled flesh and blood on the walls of the canyon, on the ground, and on the carriages. It was unknown whether it was the horses that pulled the carriages or the disciples that rode the carriages. Zhang Xiaohua and the other side as they helped the injured and immobile disciples out of the canyon. They also cleared some of the debris out of the canyon. After the time it took to eat 2 meals, they finally cleared everything out, leaving behind only huge rocks that couldn't be moved. Senior brother Chun, the leader of the Pill Tower Hall, reorganized the team and counted the losses. In just a short period of time, they had lost more than 10 carriages, more than 10 horses, and nearly 20 disciples. Moreover, these disciples who died were all smashed by rocks. Even their corpses were incomplete. In addition, there were 50 to 60 disciples who were injured. Due to the fact that the disciples of Bayou Peak were at the very front, the dead disciples were all from Bayou Peak. As for the injured disciples, most of them were injured from running over each other and trampling on each other. Bayou Peak disciples, on the other hand, did not suffer many injuries. While the Pill Sprouting Hall was counting the casualties. The disciples of the Wooming Hall were not idle either. They had fewer people injured. After the pill-sprouting hall had cleared the canyon, the leader, Senior Brother Sue, led everyone to observe the canyon that was blocked by huge rocks. It didn't matter if they didn't look, but once they did, they sucked in a breath of cold air. The giant ape was the strongest, while the human-faced monkey was also the smartest. The mountain rocks used to block the exit of the canyon were much bigger than the mountain rocks thrown into the canyon. There was not just one mountain rock, but nearly 10 of them. Moreover, these rocks were stacked on top of each other, reaching a height of 10 zhong. Senior Marshal Brother Su used his qin gong to leap to the top of the rocks. After taking a rough look, he secretly complained in his heart. There was no problem for the disciples of the Wooming Hall to pass through here. Even the disciples of the pill-sprouting hall should be able to pass through smoothly with the help of the disciples of the Wooming Hall. However, what should they do with the carriages and horses? The place for the trial of the outer disciples was not the strange birch forest. There was still a few days' journey to the strange birch forest. If they only used their qin gong, they would have exhausted their internal energy and physical strength by the time they reached there. Besides, the jade boxes used by the pill-sprouting hall to store medicinal herbs were all on the carriages. If the carriages did not pass through, they could only carry a few jade boxes in their arms. How many medicinal herbs could they pick? Therefore, the horses and carriages had to pass through this canyon. However, if they wanted to pass through this canyon, the huge rocks blocking the exit had to be cleared away. Such huge rocks made one dizzy just by looking at them. Who would have the extravagant hope of moving them away? Even for the giant apes, it was easy for them to push the rocks down together. If they were asked to move them away, even the giant apes would shake their heads. Senior Brother Su jumped down from the tallest rock and landed on a slightly lower one. He first took a horse stance and circulated qi in his dantian. Then he stretched out his arms and pressed them tightly against the rock in front of him. He gathered all the internal energy in his body into his hands. Then, with a loud shout, he pushed out with both hands. The huge rock did not move at all. Instead, the huge rock's rebounding force numbed Senior Brother Su's arms. Sighing, Senior Brother Su looked back at the exit of the canyon. Then, he jumped down from the rock and led everyone to the entrance of the canyon. He briefly told the situation in the canyon to Senior Brother Chun of the pill-sprouting hall. He sighed and said, "Junior Brother Chun, it looks like we can't move the rocks for the time being. Let's find a place to rest first. Let's set up the tents and other things first." Senior Brother Chun was stunned. He looked at the noon sun and said, This is still early." Senior Brother Su said unhappily, "This has nothing to do with the time. Even if it's early in the morning and we can't move forward, shouldn't we rest early? Just now, our brothers were all frightened in the canyon. It's better to be quiet." Senior Brother Chun looked at the bare mountain path and said awkwardly, "Senior Brother Su, the terrain here is narrow. It's not easy to set up camp. Why don't we retreat to the place we rested at yesterday?" Senior Brother Su was speechless. He said in a low voice, "The ones who attacked us just now were the human-faced monkeys and giant apes. Those are the ferocious beasts of the orchid rainforest. Don't tell me you want to send yourself under their noses?" Then, Senior Brother Su ignored Senior Brother Chun. He turned his head and shouted, "Junior Brother Kong, Junior Brother Me, each of you take 20 people and carefully search the left and right sides of the canyon. See if there's a place for a carriage to pass through." 2 disciples stepped out of the crowd and bowed. They led the disciples to the left and right sides respectively. "Junior Brother Ma, you take 2 brothers to the top of the mountain and prepare the smoke signal. Wait for my command and prepare to call for help." A short and fat disciple next to him was obviously stunned. Then, he hesitated and said, "Yes, Senior Brother Su." Seeing that Senior Brother Su didn't speak, he took 2 disciples and went to the top of the canyon with some things. At this time, a wretched-looking disciple next to him came up and said with a smile, "Senior Brother Su, I saw you channeling your inner strength on the giant rock. Although you didn't move it, your wise move moved me. I have an idea, but I don't know if I should say it. Senior brother Su's eyes lit up, and he said with a smile, "Just say it. If it works, I'll give you credit first." That disciple was excited and said, "Doesn't our wombing hall have the technique of transmitting inner strength? Although you don't have enough inner strength, 10 people's inner strength might be enough. If it doesn't work, we can channel more than 100 disciples' inner strength to you. It will definitely work." After that, that disciple waited there happily for Senior Brother Su's praise. After a long while, Senior Brother Su still didn't speak. When he stole a glance, Senior Brother Su's face was full of black lines. When he saw that disciple looking at him, he said sarcastically, "Junior brother, that's a good idea. The giant rock at the top can also be moved by 10 people. But the problem is, among these 10 people, except for me, where can the other 9 people stand?" Then he said, "If all 10 of us stand on the ground, how can we move the giant rocks?" Seeing that the disciple was about to speak, Senior Brother Su didn't let him speak and said, "Do you know the taboo of transmitting inner strength? Even if 10 people's inner strength is transmitted to my body, my meridians may be able to withstand it. But if 100 people's inner strength is transmitted to my meridians, Junior Brother Su, don't you think I'm an eyesore? Do you want my meridians to explode because of the inner strength?" That wretched disciple blushed and murmured, "Junior brother." Junior brother just had an idea and gave Senior brother a suggestion. If Senior Brother Su waved his hand and said, "Okay, go and help Junior brother me look at the smoke signal. If there is no passage left or right, we can only rely on the help of other senior brothers." Not far away, Zhang Xiaohua found it strange and asked softly, "Senior Brother Lu, what is this smoke signal for help?" Lu Chaoxian said, "The ancient said, lone smoke rises straight in the desert. This lone smoke is the smoke signal. After the blood wolf's dung is dried and ignited, it will shoot straight into the sky. It can be seen even from far away. Our orchid evening refinement relies on this for long-distance communication. As long as the smoke signal is not extinguished, it means that the problem hasn't been solved. If someone sees it, they must hurry over as soon as possible." "Oh, I see." Zhang Xiaohua pondered. Not long after, Junior Brother Kong, who was scouting on the left, came back. He didn't come back empty-handed, but everyone's face and hands were abnormally red and swollen. After asking, they found out that there was a nest of poisonous bees not far away. Not to mention finding a way through the mountain path. They were stung as soon as they got close. All the disciples returned in defeat. After a while, Junior Brother Me also came back. They were even more miserable as they lost 2 disciples. A few miles to the right of the canyon was a mountain stream, which didn't allow carriages to pass. Just beside the stream, the outer disciples who were caught off guard were attacked by dozens of wolf crocodiles. In a hurry, 2 disciples were eaten by the crocodiles. After listening to the 2 junior brothers report, Senior Brother Su didn't hesitate anymore and asked Junior Brother Ma to light the smoke signal. Not long after, a thick black smoke rushed straight to the top of the mountain. Then, Senior Brother Su waved his hand and said, "Everyone, let's set up camp and rest. We will discuss again when the other senior brothers come." Therefore, the disciples of Wooming Hall followed the disciples of Pill Tower Hall and set up their tents on the narrow mountain path, waiting for rescue. As expected, the first disciple of the incense cult who arrived was an elite disciple of the Wooming Hall. That disciple was full of confidence at first, but after listening to Senior Brother Su's introduction and looking at the huge rocks in the canyon, he could not help but shake his head. What a joke! Even the giant ape could not do this. The disciple was about to leave, but Senior Brother Su begged him to stay. Seeing that it was getting late, he decided to stay. When the sky turned dark, more than a dozen Wooming Hall disciples came, but not a single inner disciple showed up. These disciples were all at their wits' end, chatting idly on top of the canyon. Suddenly, a tall and skinny disciple with a mask on his face appeared on the mountain peak. Chapter 632. The first one who saw this disciple was Senior Brother Su from Wuming Hall. He only saw a tall and thin figure floating up the mountain like a ghost. He thought it was a senior brother from his sect, so he quickly stood up. The elite disciples in front of him were all stunned. When they turned around and saw the figure in the distance, they were all shocked. Not to mention other things, just the Qin Gong alone was definitely more powerful than them. He had already reached the peak, but he still didn't attract their attention. If it was a sneak attack, they shuddered. Who was this senior brother? However, when this person came closer, everyone was even more puzzled. They thought this person would be an inner disciple. Although the robe he wore was simple and unadorned, it was not the usual attire of the inner disciples of Fragrance Cult. Moreover, this person's face was covered. It seemed that the male disciples of Fragrance Cult didn't have such a rule. Only the true female disciples of the inner sect were qualified to wear a veil. Even if this person was an outstanding disciple of Wuming Hall, this person's attire was not the standard of Wuming Hall. Moreover, everyone here was an outer sect elite disciple who wasn't familiar with each other. This person didn't need to cover his face, right? However, everyone didn't raise their vigilance. In this Yulon Grand Canyon, if there was a beast, you should raise your vigilance. Maybe you would be bitten by the beast. But at this time in the Yulon Grand Canyon, other than the disciples of Fragrance Cult, who else could it be? Everyone didn't dare to neglect. The eldest disciple came forward and bowed. I'm Chun Wei, a disciple of Wuming Hall. Greetings to senior brother. The disciples behind also bowed. Nonsense. After guessing for a long time, they couldn't guess the identity of this person. However, this person's light body technique was superb. It was very likely that he was from Fragrance Cult. It was impossible for him to be from Heaven and Earth Hall, Cleansing Jade Hall, or Expanding Pill Hall. How could they not be polite? The two words senior martial brother didn't even cost him money. He just casually said it. The person was slightly stunned and immediately returned the greeting. My surname is Zhang. His voice was hoarse and low. Chun Wei smiled. So it's senior brother Zhang. I don't know if senior brother is from Fragrance Cult. Without waiting for Chun Wei to finish, senior brother Zhang waved his hand and said, I saw the smoke signal from afar. I don't know what happened. It's been an entire afternoon, and the smoke hasn't gone out yet? Seeing senior brother Zhang's displeasure, Chun Wei didn't dare to ask any more questions. He stepped forward and recounted what happened in the canyon. When senior brother Zhang heard this, he laughed and said, Such a small matter, yet you're helpless? All right, extinguish the smoke. Senior brother Su was taken aback. Not daring to move, he turned to look at Chun Wei. Chun Wei raged. Junior brother Su, quickly go and extinguish the smoke signal. If senior brother Zhang says there's no problem, then there's no problem. The methods of inner disciples are not something we can imagine. Inner sect disciple? Can we? Senior brother Su was also shocked. He didn't know how Chun Wei could tell that senior brother Zhang was an inner disciple, but he didn't dare to disobey Chun Wei. He hurried over and called out to several disciples to extinguish the smoke that rose straight into the night sky. At the same time, several miles away, more than 10 disciples who had rushed over saw that the signal for help had been extinguished. They all stopped and went their separate ways. Far away, a few ladies in palace attire also casually raised their heads. When they saw that the signal was extinguished, they only smiled and ignored it. They were busy with their own matters. After senior brother Su extinguished the signal, he saw senior brother Zhang walking to the top of the canyon and looking around. He pulled Chun Wei's sleeve and said, Senior brother Chun, how do you know that senior brother Zhang is an inner disciple? Didn't you say that the inner disciples wouldn't bother with 5 smoke signals? I was thinking that if I couldn't solve it tomorrow, I would light 5 smoke signals. Should junior brother Su, can you lower your voice? He's an inner disciple. He's proficient in secret sound transmission. Won't you be heard if you talk like that? Then, he looked at senior brother Zhang, who was looking down at the canyon. He lowered his voice and said, Do we have a disciple whose lightness skill is better than mine in our Wuming Hall? If he's not an inner disciple, then who is he? He didn't wait for you to light 5 smoke signals before coming. It's enough to show his enthusiasm. Don't say anything more. Let senior brother Zhang deal with the mountain rock first. Then, He thought for a while and said, I'm curious about the means of the inner disciples. How do they deal with the mountain rock? Can they shatter the mountain rock into pieces with their inner force? It's very possible. Just then, Senior Brother Zhang raised his head and smiled at them. Chenwei quickly shut up. He pointed to the side and said with a smile, Senior Brother Zhang, it's a good place to go down the canyon. Unexpectedly, Senior Brother Zhang shook his head and jumped down from the canyon. The dozens of elite disciples behind Senior Brother Zhang all opened their mouths wide. They had seen the canyon in the afternoon. It was hundreds of feet high, and both sides of the canyon were smooth. There was no way to stand on it. If they jumped down directly from here, they would either die or be disabled. Therefore, they all went down from the gentle slope on the side. Now, seeing Senior Brother Zhang suddenly jump down in the dark, how could they not be surprised? When they ran to the top of the canyon and looked down, they saw Senior Brother Zhang floating down with the help of the fire at the bottom of the canyon. He landed lightly on the mountain rock like a falling leaf. He didn't even bother to do a somersault to counteract the momentum. Tisk, tisk. There was a burst of admiration. If this didn't prove that he was an inner disciple, what kind of martial arts could? Everyone on the canyon no longer doubted Senior Brother Zhang, who came from lingering Fragrance Peak. However, what surprised them was yet to come. They thought that Senior Apprentice Brother Zhang would use his inner strength to smash the mountain rocks into pieces. But when he floated down, he didn't even use his inner strength. He stretched out his hands and grabbed the two protrusions of the topmost boulder. With a little bit of strength, he lifted the boulder above his head and threw it towards the exit of the canyon. After a long while, they heard the sound of the boulder falling to the ground. He actually threw it extremely far away. Was this a human or a giant ape? While the disciples on the canyon were surprised, Senior Brother Zhang didn't take a break. He kept jumping down from the huge rock. For every step he took, he would throw the huge rock above his head. In just a short while, he had landed on the ground. On the ground, the disciples of Wuming Hall who were guarding the canyon were stunned. They watched as the giant ape landed on the ground, and Senior Brother Zhang threw the last huge rock far away. They panicked and bowed to salute him. Senior Brother Zhang smiled and bowed to salute them. Then, he raised his head and looked at the top of the canyon. He waved his hand and floated up toward the exit of the canyon. Io, Senior Brother Zhang, please wait. Chun Wei and the others on the canyon didn't expect that Senior Brother Zhang would leave immediately after throwing the boulder out of the canyon. He didn't even talk to them. Only then did they pick up their jaws that had fallen to the ground and quickly jump down from the side. They chased after Senior Brother Zhang into the canyon. However, when they chased out of the canyon with torches, they only saw the huge boulder on both sides of the mountain path. There was no sign of Senior Brother Zhang. What a godlike person! Chenwei couldn't help but praise. He was heartbroken that he had wasted such a good opportunity to get close to the inner disciples. However, this kind of character also showed the inner disciples' arrogance. The inner sect had always been a mysterious place, and this simple male disciple was already so amazing. The boulder that dozens of outer sect disciples were helpless against was easily dealt with in a few moves. What about the female disciple who had inherited the inner sect's true teachings? Was there even a need to say anything? The inner disciples were indeed the lifelong goal of the outer disciples. For a moment, the outer disciples standing at the exit of the canyon were all excited, as if they could see the future they could look forward to. Behind them, at the entrance of the canyon, a tall and thin figure emerged from the ground. Wasn't that the inner disciple they admired, Senior Brother Zhang? Senior Brother Zhang didn't look around and took out a set of clothes from his chest. Well, he took out a set of clothes from his chest and put them on. Then, he took off the handkerchief covering his face and turned to look at the entrance of the canyon in the dark. Then, he slowly walked toward the tents in the distance. Under the moonlight, the small eyes, the slightly flat nose, and the ordinary face. Wasn't that Zhang Xiaohua and Xiaoxia? It was a quiet night. The next morning, the disciples of the Pill Sprouting Hall were all excited when they heard the news that the canyon had been cleared. If the canyon was blocked, they would be at a disadvantage. The disciples of the Wooming Hall could use their lightness skills to get through, but they couldn't. Even the team leader, Senior Brother Chun, didn't plan to let the outer disciples carry a few jade boxes to jump over the huge rock. Let alone the disciples of the Pill-Sprouting Hall. Even the ordinary disciples of the Wooming Hall didn't know how the huge rock in the canyon was cleared. Only when the disciples who were on guard at the canyon got up in the morning and whispered what had happened did they know that a god had come last night. The dozens of outer disciples who saw the smoke yesterday didn't leave immediately, but stayed at the top of the canyon. They didn't leave until the disciples of the Pill-Sprouting Hall and the Wooming Hall had passed through the canyon safely. After the caravan of the Pill-Sprouting Hall passed through the canyon, the disciples of the Pill-Sprouting Hall saw the huge rocks thrown by Zhang Xiaohua on both sides of the mountain road. Only then did they know that such a wonderful thing had happened here when they were resting. They couldn't help sighing secretly. Even Lu Chaoxian, who was in the carriage, asked Zhang Xiaohua in a low voice, "Junior Brother Ren, the rocks are so huge. How did they move to the sides of the mountain road?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "I don't know. I only know that the task of the Pill-Sprouting Hall is to pick the spiritual grass. These troublesome things should be solved by the professionals. If outer disciples can't do it, then inner disciples can do it. If one pillar of smoke doesn't work, then 5 pillars of smoke." 5 pillars of smoke. Lu Chaoxian exclaimed, "My God, I didn't seem to tell you about the 5 pillars of smoke yesterday. Did the Wooming Hall light up 5 pillars of smoke yesterday? Did the inner disciples appear?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled mysteriously. "Anything is possible. Come, there are more chapters." Chapter 633. Perhaps the disciples of the Pill-Spreading Hall and Wooming Hall had used up all their bad luck in the past few days, so they didn't encounter any obstacles during the rest of the journey. Cough, cough. It was just that there was nothing worthy of Xiaoxia's help. Although it took them nearly a day to cross the mountain range, and they didn't even set up camp at the appointed place at night. Even after the mountain range, there was a swamp and a torrential stream, but the disciples of the Wooming Hall easily dealt with the small beasts in the grass and the ferocious beasts in the swamp. They only lost a few horses, threw them into a few carriages, and a few disciples were slightly injured. At noon on the second day, after crossing the swamp and climbing a gentle slope, they came face to face with a vast and verdant forest that seemed to be dripping with water. Well, it couldn't be said to be a simple forest. Instead, it was an undulating mountainous region. Some parts of the mountainous region had trees that were several feet tall, while other parts had green grass. There were even more places where different types of medicinal herbs were planted. The most peculiar thing was that this huge mountainous area was faintly shrouded in white fog, and the strong afternoon sun couldn't penetrate it. It was the best place to plant herbs. Zhang Xiaohua was the last to climb the gentle slope. Seeing this strange scene, she couldn't help but ask, "Senior Brother Lu, do you dare to say that this isn't the back garden of a fragrant cult?" "Oh, the back garden of herbs?" Lu Chaoxian also had a dumbfounded look on his face. After a long while, he opened his mouth and said, "I've long heard from my senior brother, but I didn't really believe it. Now it seems that our Pill-Expanding Hall's grass department should be moved here. The herbs here are almost incomparable to all the herbs planted in the grass department." While the two were talking, the leader of the Wooming Hall, Senior Brother Su, walked to the leader of the Pill-Spreading Hall, Senior Brother Chun. He cupped his hands and said, "Junior Brother Chun, this is the strange birch forest. I didn't disappoint you and brought you here safely. The day before yesterday, we were delayed for half a day in the canyon. Now is the time to say goodbye." Senior Brother Chun also smiled wholeheartedly. "Thank you for the support of the Wooming Hall. I thank you on behalf of all the brothers. I wouldn't dare. It is my duty." Then he pointed to a small river in the distance and said, "I presume that Vice Hall Master Su has already told us that as long as we don't cross that river and don't climb up the mountain, this area is safe." Senior Brother Chun nodded. "Now that I've woken up, I won't be able to break through easily. I wish Senior Brother Su success in your trial. I'll wait here for Senior Brother's good news." "Haha, well said, well said." Senior Marshal Brother Sue whistled and grabbed the reins with both hands. The horse he was sitting on let out a long neigh and headed in another direction. All of the outer sect disciples turned their horses around, clamped their legs together, and followed. Lu Lihong was at the back of the group. When all the disciples passed by him, he cupped his hands toward Zhang Xiaohua and said, "Junior brother Run. See you later." "Ha. Senior brother Lu, be careful. See you after the trial." Zhang Xiaohua replied politely. However, Lu Lihong's eyes flashed with a trace of a smile, and he also left. When the disciples of the Wuming Hall were far away, Senior Marshal Brother Chen shouted, "Junior brothers, this is the strange birch forest, the destination of our trip to the Yulon Grand Canyon. For the next 20 days, we will be staying here. Look at the herbs everywhere. Many of them are decades-old spirit herbs. As long as we bring these spirit herbs back to the Pill Repository Hall, it will be a great merit." Think about it. We don't have to risk our lives like the outer sect disciples. As long as we raise our hands, we can achieve merit like them. Why not? Haha. All the disciples were happy and said, "Senior Marshal Brother Chun is right. We will listen to Senior Marshal Brother's arrangement." Everyone must have made sufficient preparations before coming here, so I won't say more. I just want to emphasize 2 points. First, pay attention to your safety and don't cross the border. Everyone must know that this area was explored by the predecessors, and if you step out, you will have to bear the consequences. There have been such precedents before, and although there were some who returned safely, there were many who died outside. Second, when picking spiritual herbs, you must pay attention to the age. Don't pick those that are less than 20 years old, and only pick those that are older. Haha. If we pick all the herbs and return to the Pill Tower Hall, not only will we not be rewarded, but we will also be punished. Otherwise, 5 years later, how will our junior brothers come pick again? Senior Marshal Brother Chun said humorously, and everyone laughed. I know, Senior Marshal Brother, this is just common sense. You should hurry up and give the order. We have long wanted to achieve merit for our Pill Repository Hall. Senior Marshal Brother Chun nodded. Then I announced the official start of the Yulon Evening Refinement. Then he waved his hand. Everyone laughed and rushed down the gentle slope in the carriage. Under the gentle slope, they continued for several miles until they came to a flat place. There were many stones placed here, which seemed to be divided into different areas. Everyone stopped, and under the arrangement of Senior Marshal Brother Chun, the disciples of the 4 peaks each occupied a different area. There were many spirit herbs in the strange birch forest, and the area was very wide. Naturally, they could not just pick them randomly. Under the leadership of Senior Marshal Brother Chun, the disciples of each peak were divided into areas to pick herbs, and then under the leadership of their respective leaders, they went to different places. The first to go was naturally the disciples of White Mountain Peak. Under the leadership of Senior Marshal Brother Chun, they went to the east, followed by the disciples of Three Reeds Peak and Jing Peak. Under the leadership of their respective leaders, they went to the south and west respectively. Finally, the disciples of Tianmu Peak also moved. The 3 areas of the strange birch forest were occupied by the disciples of the other peaks, and they only occupied the last area. Although this area was very close to the river, it was still safe. Moreover, the herbs everywhere were lush, and no one could see the difference. The area near the river was in the north of the strange birch forest. It was not very far, and it did not take long for them to arrive. The 3 Arhats and Lu Chaoxian divided the area into 4 areas, each leading a group of disciples to different areas to pick herbs. Needless to say, Zhang Xiaohua, Lu Chaoxian, and the other 8 disciples were considered group. Although they were few in number, the strange birch forest was very large. Even after being divided again and again, there was still a lot of space for the 10 of them to pick. Looking at the lush herbs, Lu Chaoxian and the others smiled. When they returned this time, the reward from a haul would definitely not be small. Senior Marshal Brother Wang, who had been bitten by the 5-colored snake a few days ago, had completely recovered. He walked in front of Zhang Xiaohua and said, "Junior Brother Run, I am not willing to say too much about saving your life. I know that you are looking for the ice soul grass that has been here for hundreds of years, but according to the disciples who came here, this thing cannot be found in the area where we picked it. Therefore, Junior Brother N wants to go to other places to look for it, and it is best to go now and not wait until the end to look for it. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "That's right. If there was, it would have been picked 5 years ago. How could it be left until now?" Senior Marshal Brother Wang smiled and said, "What I mean is, since you are our leader, I will not argue with you. You go look for your ice soul grass, and we brothers will pick it here. I will give half of the herbs I pick to you. Even if you can't pick the ice soul grass, there won't be too much loss in other aspects. What do you think?" Several disciples beside him also said, "Since Senior Marshal Brother Wang said so, we can't fall behind. How about we give 30% of the herbs to Junior Brother Ren?" Seeing the deep affection of the disciples, Zhang Xiaohua was really moved. He also knew that this was the effect of the antidote. This thing was insignificant to him, but in the eyes of others, he was warm-hearted. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua cupped his hands and said, "I appreciate your kind intentions, Senior Marshal Brothers. It's just picking 100-years-old ice soul grass. It's no big deal. You guys go ahead and pick it. If I can't find it, then I will do as you say. If I can pick it, then I will pick it for the rest of the time. What do you think?" Hearing Zhang Xiaohua's tone, the disciples pretended that they didn't hear it. They only thought that he was comforting them, so they smiled and agreed. After the crowd left, Zhang Xiaohua touched his nose, and the corner of his mouth curved into an unfathomable smile. First, he jumped on top of a tall tree and carefully identified it. Then he directly used his qing gong and flew in a direction. As he sped, he was secretly proud of his good luck. How could they not say that Zhang Xiaohua's luck was good? Cough, cough. Good luck? At that time, after the gambling fight, didn't they want to use pills to exchange for herbs? A senior marshal brother Liao from the grass division came late and wanted to ask for this small bone congealing pill, so he used the information of an herb as the price. This herb was the ice soul grass. It was also old enough. That day, Zhang Xiaohua only listened and didn't take it seriously. After all, at that time, he felt that the Valley Orchid evening refinement was far away from him, so he didn't need to consider it. But things were so coincidental. Zhang Xiaohua was not only sent to the Valley Orchid, but also made up for his mistakes, so this ice soul grass was used as punishment. Thus, when Zhang Xiaohua arrived at the strange birch forest, he had to think about how to go to the place that senior marshal brother Liao mentioned and pick the ice soul grass first. Of course, according to what senior marshal brother Liao said, the ice soul grass had extremely dangerous beasts, so it was no longer within Zhang Xiaohua's scope of consideration. He even planned that if possible, he would wander around that dangerous place more, and it would be best if he could pick the main ingredients of the Yuandan pill. Zhang Xiaohua went straight north, and after a while, he arrived at a fast-flowing river. He didn't stop and crossed it in a few leaps. Just as he was about to look left and right and continue his search, he suddenly felt something and released his divine sense. He saw that 10 zhang to the west, on the side of a big tree, someone was quietly hiding there, revealing his eyes and observing his back. Chapter 634. It was not unusual for someone to come here, but it would be thought-provoking if they could display a good lightness skill. After all, among the disciples of the Pill Repository Hall, except for the 3 arhats of the Tianmu Peak, there were not many disciples of the other 3 peaks who knew lightness skill. Moreover, they would definitely not come to such a dangerous place on the first day of picking. When Zhang Xiaohua saw clearly with his divine sense, his expression became more and more interesting. Zhang Xiaohua did not show any expression. He made a gesture and went underground, only revealing his divine sense to observe carefully. He saw that person using qing gong to come here. He first stopped and looked around carefully. Then he jumped onto a big tree and looked across the river. He said to himself, "Yes, it's here." This person had a white face, a short stature, and a somewhat frivolous tone. Wasn't he the most respected senior Lu Li Hong of the Pill Repository Hall? Then, after observing the surroundings for a while, he went straight ahead. When Lu Lihong went far away, Zhang Xiaohua came out from the ground. Looking at Lu Lihong's back, he was surprised. Didn't they say that the Wuming Hall's disciples did not train here? Why is senior martial brother Lu here? Oh, maybe he wanted to pick some old spiritual herbs. After all, the last time he came here, he found a few hundred years old ginseng. This thing is very precious. Lu Lihong coming to pick herbs had nothing to do with Zhang Xiaohua. Naturally, he did not need to care. When Lu Lihong went far away, Zhang Xiaohua identified the direction and went straight in the direction that Senior Liao said. Senior brother Liao from the Grass Division could be considered a bold person. His martial arts weren't very strong, but after he had gathered enough medicinal herbs, he had secretly crossed the river and entered the forest. However, his luck didn't seem to be as good as Lu Lihong's. He didn't find any good medicinal herbs. It wasn't until the last day that he found a stalk of ice soul grass. It was estimated to be at least a few hundred years old. Just as he was about to ecstatically pick it, he was immediately frightened by a loud roar. Not far away, a huge figure was quietly watching him. It was the white bear that the disciples had talked about countless times. When he saw the white bear, he did not dare to stay and immediately ran to the river. He did not know whether his character was good or the white bear had other things to do, so he did not chase after him. That was why he escaped with his life. Of course, when he used this information to exchange for the pill with Zhang Xiaohua, he made it clear that he only provided the location. As for whether Zhang Xiaohua could get it or not, that was Zhang Xiaohua's matter. So when Zhang Xiaohua heard his information and the white bear, she could only show a strange expression. After a meal's time, Zhang Xiaohua still did not find any trace of the ice soul grass. She even messed up the location and signs that Senior Liao said. In the end, she could only give up and wait until tomorrow to look again. Of course, because the pill-expanding hall rarely came to this forest, although she did not pick the ice soul grass, she picked many other herbs along the way. She even came across a few stalks of the other main ingredient of the Yuhuandan pill, cold light grass, and they were all more than 100 years old. So even if she did not find the ice soul grass today, Zhang Xiaohua did not feel the slightest regret. There was still a lot of time, and she could slowly search for it. It was already late today. Zhang Xiaohua picked different herbs as she walked. By the time she reached the riverside, she had already filled a few jade boxes to the brim. Along the way, she did not encounter any ferocious beasts. She did not even see Lu Lihong from before. If you were to pick it yourself, you would be able to get it easily. Why would you exchange it with pills? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and put away the black voidwood. Then she asked, Senior Martial Brother Wang, if I go to the various tents now to see if they have such herbs, and give them pills in exchange, what do you think? Senior Martial Brother Wang did not answer. Lu Chaoxian immediately shook his head and said, Don't, Junior Brother Run. This is just a useless herb. I don't know why you use it, but if you go look for it now, not to mention that you will make by Yefeng's Senior Martial Brother unhappy, he will casually accuse you of a crime, and you will have to atone for it. Moreover, they will think that what they picked is good stuff and increase the price for no reason. It's best to wait until we leave the Grand Canyon and complete the transaction with the hall. And if you like these, when us brothers pick them tomorrow, just pay more attention. What we originally disdained, we can pick casually without much effort. Zhang Xiaohua thought about it and agreed. She nodded in agreement. At this time, she noticed that this tent, cough cough, was actually connected together again. It seemed that even in this safe place, these disciples could not be completely at ease. There were not many herbs picked today, and it did not take long for them to be sorted out. Zhang Xiaohua sat in a corner of the tent and closed her eyes to cultivate. The other disciples also knew of Zhang Xiaohua's habits and only stayed outside the tent or in other places, not disturbing her. Only when the sky was completely dark did she slowly stand up. Lu Chaoxian and the others were about to rest. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua stand up, they were all surprised and asked, Junior Brother Run, what are you doing? Zhang Xiaohua said mysteriously, I have no choice. I still have a mission on my shoulders, so I have to rush to work at night. Just now when I crossed the river, I saw a place, but it was guarded by ferocious beasts, so I did not dare to go forward. That's fine. The ferocious beasts will rest at night. I'll go and take a look. If I can pick it, wouldn't that be better? Senior Brother Wang was shocked and hurriedly pulled Zhang Xiaohua, saying, Junior Brother Run, don't be like this. Even if you can't pick the ice soul grass, you'll just be whipped a few times. It won't be serious. You'll be in danger this time. Many ferocious beasts are sensitive and won't rest at night. If something happens to you, the gains will not make up for the losses. Seeing that Senior Brother Wang was so agitated, Zhang Xiaohua patted his shoulder. Senior Brother, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. I won't throw away my life at will. When we go back, I'll be your leader along the way. Senior Brother Wang saw that he couldn't win against Zhang Xiaohua, so he looked at Lu Chaoxian. Lu Chaoxian knew that Senior Brother Wang was grateful to Zhang Xiaohua for saving his life. Moreover, he saw that Zhang Xiaohua was young, so he was watching over him closely. However, Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts were high, which was also commonly known as the skilled or bold. How could they persuade him? Lu Chaoxian could only smile bitterly as he stepped forward and said, Junior Martial Brother Rin, Senior Martial Brother Wang really treats you as his own brother. Moreover, we also treat you as our Junior Martial Brother. Don't let us down. Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, Senior Brother Wang, Senior Brother Lu, and other senior brothers, I really don't have any problems. Didn't I also break through the entrance of the Yulon Grand Canyon? The 9 disciples were speechless. That's right, they weren't on the same level as this junior brother of theirs. They had only expressed their concern, but whether the other party would accept it or not, they didn't have any assurance. Everyone watched as Zhang Xiaohua walked out of the tent. Suddenly, he turned back and said with a smile, Fellow senior brothers, although it's safe here, it's not Tianmu Peak. If there's nothing else, even if there's something, we can talk about it when I come back tomorrow. This tent, by all means, don't go out. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was so serious about this matter, the disciples nodded. However, Lu Chaoxian suddenly asked, Then what about our carriages? Wouldn't it be unsafe to leave it outside? Zhang Xiaohua was surprised and shrugged his shoulders. If you're not afraid, you can bring in the horses that pull the carriages. In any case, I'm not staying here, so there's a lot of space. Lu Chaoxian was originally joking, but seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was so serious about this matter, he could only look at the other disciples. Those disciples also snickered, so they could only follow Zhang Xiaohua's intention and bring in the horses that were tied to the entrance of the tent. In fact, horses were the main mounts of the Pill Expansion Hall disciples. Many disciples in the campsite saw that there were no Wuming Hall disciples outside to protect them, so they brought their horses in. Lu Chaoxian's actions didn't attract any attention. Zhang Xiaohua stood in the darkness and waited for the 2 disciples to bring the horses in. Seeing that there was no one around, she placed the jade talisman around the tent and made a gesture to activate the prohibition spell. Only then did she escape into the ground and went straight to the riverside. The night was very quiet, with only a few insects chirping. Zhang Xiaohua didn't escape out of the ground and only moved slightly underground. When she reached the riverside, just as she was about to jump out of the ground, her divine sense suddenly discovered that there was a person hiding on the high slope. Who is this? Zhang Xiaohua was very surprised. Chapter 635. When Zhang Xiaohua saw the person's face clearly, she was even more astonished. Wasn't this Lu Lihong whom she saw in the forest during the day? What was this guy doing here? However, when she saw Lu Lihong staring at the faint flames in the campsite, Zhang Xiaohua seemed to have understood something. Then, a thought flashed through her mind like lightning. Could it be that this guy is looking for me? But why was he looking for her? Zhang Xiaohua was even more confused. If Chun Fengxiao had a grudge against Rejuvenation Valley and wanted to make an example out of her, she could be considered to know the reason. But if it was Lu Lihong, could it be that he also had an old grudge against Rejuvenation Valley? But there were many disciples from Rejuvenation Valley, so there was no need to find trouble with her, right? Io, because she was Rejuvenation Valley's prospective son-in-law. Of course, Zhang Xiaohua faintly had another guess in her mind. However, that guess was really inconceivable, so she could not be sure no matter what. Oomph. Anyway, whether it's a mule or a horse, I'll just take it out for a ride tomorrow. Who's afraid of you? Zhang Xiaohua secretly despised him and continued to move forward without showing her head. Only when she found a suitable cave did she reveal her head. She sealed the entire cave and sat down cross-legged to cultivate the Carefree Heart Sutra. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua returned to the campsite and saw that Lu Lihong was still meditating on the high slope. She ignored him and directly returned to the campsite, removing the seal outside the tent. Inside the tent, 9 people and a few horses were all sitting well. When they saw Zhang Xiaohua return, they were all happy and welcomed her, saying, "Junior brother Ren, how was your harvest? We listened to you. After you left, we didn't even take a step out of this tent." Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, "Still nothing. It's late at night, so I'll sleep outside." Senior brother Wang and the others said, "It's all right, Junior brother Ren. It's still early, so you can slowly search for it." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and didn't say anything else. After everyone finished packing up, they went out to pick herbs again. Zhang Xiaohua said goodbye to everyone and left the tent, heading towards the river. This time, he didn't directly burrow into the ground. Instead, he used his qin gong to walk slowly. Looking at the level of his qin gong, it was at the same level as when he fought with Lu Lihong. Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense couldn't reach far, so he couldn't look back. Thus, he didn't know if Lu Lihong was following him or not. He just kept rushing forward until he crossed the river and found a secluded place. Then, he turned around and disappeared. Sure enough, not long after, Lu Lihong came over and walked to the place where Zhang Xiaohua disappeared. He looked around with an anxious expression on his face, as if he was in a hurry. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the disciple she met as soon as she entered the fragrant religion. Moreover, he was the idol of the Pill Repository Hall and a senior from Rejuvenation Valley. She felt very uncomfortable. This person had been tempered by worldly affairs, so how could he become so unrecognizable? Lu Lihong looked around and jumped to the ground to observe the traces of Zhang Xiaohua. However, the traces inexplicably disappeared. No matter how he looked, he couldn't find any clues. Lu Lihong sighed, and with a gloomy face, he sneaked towards the direction where Zhang Xiaohua went yesterday, as if he was afraid that someone would discover him. Zhang Xiaohua quietly followed him. Lu Lihong walked for a while and didn't see anything unusual. He also didn't see any movement. Then, he turned around and went in another direction. Zhang Xiaohua still followed. After the time it took to eat a meal, Lu Lihong arrived at the location of a pond. He saw that the pond was next to a small mountain. Spring water flowed from the small mountain into the pond. The pond was so clear that one could see the bottom of the pond at a glance. This place was very quiet and was very far from the Pill Repository Hall's camp. Even if something strange happened, no one would be able to find it. When Lu Lihong came to the pool to check, Zhang Xiaohua jumped to the hill behind the pool. Then, she pretended to be searching and slowly walked down the hill. She deliberately slowed down her footsteps and made her steps heavier, as if she didn't know anything. Her actions were heard by Lu Lihong from afar. When Lu Lihong heard the movement, he left and hid behind a rock. Although Zhang Xiaohua lowered her head, her spiritual awareness had already locked onto Lu Lihong. However, when he walked to the pool, she deliberately wandered around the pool to whet Lu Lihong's appetite. Then, she moved away from the rock where Lu Lihong was hiding. But after a few steps, she pretended to think of something and walked in another direction. However, that direction was right next to Lu Lihong. Lu Lihong, who was beside the rock, had been teased by Zhang Xiaohua. There were several times when he wanted to explode, but he felt that she was too far away for him to launch a sneak attack. So he endured it. When Zhang Xiaohua was about to walk away, he almost jumped out. Who knew that Zhang Xiaohua would turn in another direction? Lu Lihong was so scared that he immediately retracted his head and pricked up his ears, quietly estimating Zhang Xiaohua's footsteps. Just when Zhang Xiaohua walked to the side of the rock, Lu Lihong, who had been planning for a long time, flashed out from behind the rock. A pair of fleshy palms emitted a faint silver light and directly hit Zhang Xiaohua's chest. Zhang Xiaohua's face was full of surprise. She was simply caught unprepared. She only had time to raise her arm when Lu Lihong hit her chest. Zhang Xiaohua's thin and tall body was like a kite with a broken string. She was shaken to the side, and a trace of blood immediately flowed out from the corner of her mouth. When Zhang Xiaohua softly lay on the ground, Lu Lihong walked closer with a smile. Zhang Xiaohua's face was full of surprise. She raised her arm with difficulty and asked, "Senior, Brother Lu, why?" Lu Lihong's smile was extremely bright, and his face was warm. He shook his head and said, "Junior Brother Run, although you and I are both from Rejuvenation Valley, I can't help it. Who told you to offend someone? I was only following orders." Zhang Xiaohua weakly said, "Senior, Brother Lu, I haven't even seen a single outer disciple. Who could I have offended? You tell me. Even if I die, I want to be a ghost who understands." "Ha ha." Lu Lihong looked up to the sky and laughed. He pulled out a long sword from his waist and said, "Junior Brother Rin, could it be that you've read too many novels? You're still so naive. You're about to die. Why do you still want to be a ghost who understands? Senior Brother will send you on your way. It's better to be a ghost who dies." After he finished speaking, he didn't reveal any details. He raised his sword and stabbed towards Zhang Xiaohua's throat. Seeing that the sharp tip of the sword was about to pierce Zhang Xiaohua's throat, Lu Lihong's face had already revealed a smile. He saw that Zhang Xiaohua also sighed and stretched out her left hand. Her index finger and thumb caught the lightning-fast sword. Lu Lihong was shocked. He didn't have time to think why Zhang Xiaohua suddenly had the strength to counterattack. He quickly changed his move and wanted to stab Zhang Xiaohua's eyes. Unfortunately, before he could raise his wrist, Zhang Xiaohua's two fingers had already caught the tip of his sword. Seeing this, Lu Lihong quickly used his internal energy to pull back. However, no matter how hard he tried, the sword didn't move an inch. Lu Lihong was also alert. He immediately withdrew his hand and took a few steps back. He looked at Zhang Xiaohua with a face full of surprise. Zhang Xiaohua slowly stood up from the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. She looked at Lu Lihong and smiled. "Sigh. In order to make you believe me, I had to bite my tongue. TSK, the last time I bit my tongue was because of Lord Peacock Kong." "Peacock? Lord Peacock?" Lu Lihong was immediately dumbfounded. That was a famous inner disciple. Lu Lihong didn't know about other inner disciples, but he was already tired of hearing about Peacock. This brat in front of him actually bit his tongue in order to trick Peacock. Could it be? Just like today, Lu Lihong didn't dare to think about it. He couldn't think about it anymore. He injured Zhang Xiaohua with his palms and wanted to stab Zhang Xiaohua to death with his sword. How could there be any room for reconciliation? Lu Lihong didn't hesitate. He raised his pale, silver palm again. Like a ghost, he attacked Zhang Xiaohua from a strange angle. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dodge at all. Pong! His palm hit the ground. Before Lu Lihong could rejoice, he saw Zhang Xiaohua smiling and saying, "Senior Brother Lu, your martial arts aren't bad, right?" Lu Lihong suddenly remembered that he had used the heart-shattering palm to hit Zhang Xiaohua. He was fine then, so how could she be injured now? Lu Lihong couldn't think of any martial arts that Zhang Xiaohua knew. She wasn't even afraid of the heart-shattering palm. It didn't seem to be a martial art that he had tested on Tianmu Peak. Lu Lihong thought of something and immediately broke out in cold sweat. However, he still didn't give up hope. He raised his leg and kicked Zhang Xiaohua's chest. Zhang Xiaohua still didn't fight back. Lu Lihong used the strength of his kick to quickly use his qin gong to run out of the forest. After running for a while, he didn't hear any footsteps. When he looked back, there was no one. Lu Lihong couldn't help but be overjoyed. He thought to himself, "This young man is too inexperienced. His qin gong isn't as good as mine. Why is he still pretending to be a wolf? Look, once I use my qin gong, you won't be able to catch up." At this moment, a voice suddenly came from above his head. "Senior Brother Lu, are you looking for me?" Lu Lihong looked up in surprise. 3 feet above his head, Zhang Xiaohua was standing steadily in the air. Her clothes fluttered in the wind. It was an immortal flying in the sky. "You?" Lu Lihong shouted. How could he still control the qi in his meridians? Plop! He fell to the ground. Even when he hit the ground, his eyes didn't leave Zhang Xiaohua's floating body. This was simply too shocking. Seeing Lu Lihong fall, Zhang Xiaohua pressed her body down and slowly landed on the ground. She smiled and said, "Senior Brother Lu, are you still going to run?" Lu Lihong's face was pale. His fingers were trembling. He pointed at Zhang Xiaohua and said, Who are you?" Zhang Xiaohua shook her head. "Senior Brother Lu, could it be that you've read too many novels? You're about to die, so why are you asking so many questions? Understanding ghosts and confused ghosts are all dead ghosts. What's the difference?" Chapter 636. Zhang Xiaohua's words were exactly what Lu Lihong had just said. It was ironic that Zhang Xiaohua returned it to him. But Lu Lihong still didn't give up and begged, "Junior Brother Ren, looking at your martial arts, it should be an inner disciple's immortal technique." Then his face changed, and he covered his mouth. "Ren Xiaoxia, I didn't see anything, and I don't know why you came to the fragrant religion. You don't have to lower yourself to my level. Just treat me like a fart and let me go." Zhang Xiaohua smiled. "Since you know I came to the fragrant religion with a purpose, do you think I'll let you go?" This. Lu Lihong hesitated and then begged. "No matter what you came here for, Ren Xiaoxia, you're just one person. Although I'm not good at martial arts, I can still be of help. Even if I'm a dog, I can still be useful, right? Please spare my life. I'll be your dog for the rest of my life." Then he took out a small package and handed it to Zhang Xiaohua. "Ren Xiaoxia, this is some of the pills I've accumulated and a few spirit herbs. All right, the dragon scale fruit you saw last time is also inside. I didn't recognize Mount Tai and offended you. Please don't take it to heart." Zhang Xiaohua's heart moved, but she didn't take the package. She just smiled and said, "Then, can you tell me now, who sent you to kill me?" "Vice Hall Leader Su of the Pill Tower Hall. He was the one who sent me." "Vice Hall Leader Su." Zhang Xiaohua was not surprised at all. Previously, someone had asked for his golden leaf. He guessed that was a high-ranking member of the Pill Tower Hall. Then, Vice Hall Master Su had asked him to pick some ice soul grass that was hundreds of years old and send him to the other side of the river. If he still could not guess who it was, then Zhang Xiaohua would not be worthy of being the successor of the Immortal Path. However, Zhang Xiaohua really didn't understand why Vice Hall Leader Su wanted to kill her. Was it only because of the golden leaves? Then do you know why Vice Hall Leader Su wants to kill me? This. Lu Lihong was also at a loss for words. He really didn't know why the high and mighty Deputy Hall Master Su would kill a little medicine boy from Rejuvenation Valley. Therefore, after a slight hesitation, he said, "Although Deputy Hall Master Su didn't explain it to me, I think that perhaps young Hero Rin gave himself away in front of the old man and let him see through your intentions. That's why he decided to kill you." Eh? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. How could this be? She had only seen Vice Hall Leader Su twice. Then, he realized that Lu Lihong was eager to survive and wanted to take advantage of every opportunity. At this moment, even if someone asked him to badmouth the aroma cult's leader, he would do so without hesitation. Although Zhang Xiaohua wanted to ask about the Misty Hall, she couldn't tell how reliable Lu Lihong's words were. Moreover, this would expose her purpose, which was extremely unwise. Therefore, before Zhang Xiaohua could say anything, Lu Lihong immediately said flatteringly, "Ren Xiaoxia, don't worry. As long as you let me go, I will go back and ask Vice Hall Leader Su. Even if I have to sacrifice my life, I will help you find the truth." Zhang Xiaohua smiled. The Orchid Dusk refinement wasn't over yet. Lu Lihong hadn't even participated in the Outer Disciples trial. How could he bear to go to the White Mountain Peak? This guy was really good at lying. Moreover, as long as he got out of trouble today, how could she be sure of what would happen in the future? If Lu Lihong sold her to the fragrant religion, would she help him count the copper coins? Zhang Xiaohua looked at Lu Lihong, but her divine sense scanned his entire body. She paid special attention to his slightly bent left arm, which was holding a bag. She then said softly, "Senior brother Lu, when you went to Tianmu Peak previously, you must have wanted to find out more about this little brother." Lu Lihong said awkwardly, "Haha, junior brother Run is indeed wise. This little one was threatened by old man Su and had no choice but to go. It's just that, at that time, I really wanted to find out more about your martial arts." I didn't expect, seeing that Lu Lihong was about to make a fuss. Zhang Xiaohua quickly waved her hand and said, "Since senior brother Lu went prepared, you must have known about this little one situation at Tianmu Peak." Lu Lihong didn't know what she meant by this, so he could only brace himself and say, "Haha, that's right. This little one is very respectful towards junior brother Rin. Then you should know how my first battle on Tianmu Peak was started, right? Of course, wasn't it because that stupid Cheng Shi wanted to take advantage of Ren Xiaoxia?" At this point, Lu Lihong's face turned ashen. He understood the meaning of Zhang Xiaohua's words. "Yes, you asked me to give you 10 times the respect. If you want to kill me, I will take your life." Seeing Zhang Xiaohua say such ruthless words with a smile, Lu Lihong was stunned. He pointed at Zhang Xiaohua's back and said, "Monkey hunting bird?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. Her head naturally turned to the left, but she immediately reacted. But at this moment, Lu Lihong's left arm threw a package at Zhang Xiaohua's face. When Zhang Xiaohua turned around and caught the package, Lu Lihong's left arm moved. A large cluster of steel needles flashing with black light shot towards her face like a swarm of bees. Looking at the black light of the steel needles, it was obvious that they were dipped in poison. The large cluster of steel needles covered her from head to chest. Presumably, Lu Lihong knew that his palm attack would be ineffective, so he had already targeted her face. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes twitched. Her hesitation from before became even more resolute. Although the steel needles were powerful, at such a short distance, an ordinary martial arts expert would not be able to guard against them. Unfortunately, this was within the range of Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense. Moreover, she had already noticed the abnormality in Lu Lihong's left arm. Although the steel needles were in front of her in an instant, and although Lu Lihong's eyes were filled with joy, Zhang Xiaohua's fingers moved slightly. The steel needles flew towards Zhang Xiaohua's eyes and suddenly stopped. It was as if there was an invisible wall in front of Zhang Xiaohua. Then, Zhang Xiaohua looked at them with pity. Her eyes flashed with disappointment and panic. She waved her hand, and the steel needles in the air turned around and shot towards Lu Lihong's face at the same speed as what Zhang Xiaohua had shot. You! Lu Lihong, who had seen Zhang Xiaohua's imperial wind technique, still underestimated Zhang Xiaohua's magical power. He never thought that Zhang Xiaohua would be able to break his hidden weapon like this. At the same time, he never thought that he would die under his carefully designed hidden weapon. The poisonous steel needles were very powerful. They sank into most of Lu Lihong's body. The moment the steel needles touched his body, the poison immediately covered his face like a dark cloud and quickly spread down. However, the poison had no effect because Lu Lihong's face was pierced by hundreds of steel needles. He lost his life at that moment. Even when he died, his eyes did not close. He died with his eyes open. Who on earth was Zhang Xiaohua? The poison in the steel needles was very strong. In this short period of time, Lu Lihong's face had already festered, and the other parts of his body were gradually affected. Alas, Zhang Xiaohua sighed. If I had known this would happen, why would I have racked my brains to enter Wuming Hall? Why would I have become Deputy Hall Master Su's lackey? Deputy Hall Master Su. Zhang Xiaohua's heart was filled with hatred. He had come to the fragrant cult, and he had been honest, planting herbs and refining pills. He had wanted to keep a low profile and look for his second brother. He had not provoked anyone. So how could he have caught Vice Hall Master Su's attention? Not only did he want her golden leaf, but he also wanted her life. Lu Lihong died because he wanted to kill her. But after all, He was instructed by someone. Who was the mastermind behind this? Did he also want to get the ending he wanted? It was undeniable that Zhang Xiaohua had already marked Deputy Home Master Su's face with a big red cross. With a cold snort, Zhang Xiaohua glanced at Lu Lihong's corpse and thought, "This poison is so strong. It saved me a lot of effort. Soon, no matter who comes, they will not know that the pride of Pill-Expanding Hall had died here in an extremely disgraceful manner." Then, Zhang Xiaohua looked at the small package in his left hand. He did not like the things of the dead, but this package was given to him by Lu Lihong before his death. Lu Lihong was a bad person, but he did not distinguish between good and bad things. Anyway, it would be a waste if he did not take it. Zhang Xiaohua was too lazy to check what was in the package. This ruffian actually treated the unripe dragon scale fruit as a treasure. There might not be anything good in it. He threw the package into his money bag and was about to do his business. Although he wanted to find fault with Deputy Hall Master Su, he still wanted to find the ice soul grass. Even if Deputy Hall Master Su did not find fault with him and asked him to redeem himself, he still wanted to find the main ingredient to refine the Yuandan pill. At this moment, his hand touched something in his bosom. It was the belt he found beside the pond in the Yulon Prairie. He took it out and carefully observed it. It was a 5-finger-wide belt. From the surface, it was sapphire blue and engraved with wonderful patterns. It looked very comfortable. Needless to say, it would add a lot of color to the waist. However, this belt was not so simple. When Zhang Xiaohua scanned it with his divine sense, he saw a layer of faint restriction on the belt. This restriction was about to collapse, but from the gap of the restriction, there was a trace of primordial qi fluctuation. Zhang Xiaohua, who had picked up countless junk left behind by the celestial Tao, was now very experienced. He thought for a moment and immediately cast a spell with his right hand. In just a few moves, the restriction was destroyed with a pong sound, revealing the true appearance of the belt. Cough, cough, his true appearance was still the belt. However, the belt flashed with the fluctuations of the world's essence qi. When Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense once again entered the belt, an expression of disbelief flashed across her face. Chapter 637. When Zhang Xiaohua immersed his divine sense into the belt, he did not encounter any restriction, but he found a large space in the belt, a space similar to a money bag. However, this space was more than 10 times larger than the money bag. Is this also a money bag? Zhang Xiaohua thought with some helplessness. Unfortunately, this money bag was empty. Not to mention any silver, there was not even a large amount of money. There was only a single white jade slip placed in a corner of the vast space. Zhang Xiaohua was used to using money bags. With just a move of his divine sense, the jade slip appeared in his left hand. The jade slip did not have any restriction on it, so it was naked and cute. When Zhang Xiaohua immersed his divine sense into it again, the expression on his face was more interesting than when he saw the space in the belt. What was recorded in it was actually alchemy, but the method of alchemy was different from what Zhang Xiaohua had learned. What Zhang Xiaohua had learned before was nothing more than the quenching of medicinal herbs, fusing the main and auxiliary herbs together through the incubation process to form a medicinal pill. This medicinal pill was the essence of the medicinal herbs, which satisfied all kinds of needs. But the alchemy method that Zhang Xiaohua saw at this time, although it was the same few steps, the incantation was different, and even the difference was huge. However, this was not the fundamental reason why Zhang Xiaohua's expression changed. He was surprised that the main and auxiliary herbs to be quenched were not all medicinal herbs, but many of them were monster pills and medicinal stones. In other words, the difference from the previous alchemy was the method of quenching the monster pills and medicinal stones. Zhang Xiaohua naturally understood the concept of medicinal stones. In the Qi Huang technique, there were many herbs that needed to be combined with medicinal stones to treat diseases. Those medicinal stones needed to be concocted and steamed. But what was this, Yao Dan? Looking at the back carefully, there were also some pill formulas. The pill formulas were all the monster pills and medicinal stones mentioned in the previous alchemy method, but there were very few that used medicinal herbs. At the very front of these pill formulas was a pill called Marrow Cleansing Pill. Looking at the pill formula, it was refined using a so-called second-grade demon core. Zhang Xiaohua felt a headache coming on. She hadn't even figured out what the Yao core was, and now it was a level 2 Yao core. Who knew what this level 2 meant? He had heard that in the government, the rank of an official was determined by rank. Perhaps this second grade, Yao Dan, was very powerful. As for the function of the marrow cleansing pill, the jade slip did not explain clearly. Presumably, this marrow cleansing pill was not some extraordinary pill during the era of the immortal Tao. Everyone knew about it, which was why people were too lazy to record it. Following closely behind was the poison dragon pill. This pill formula was even more bizarre. Other than the demonic core, it also required a type of snake venom. Snake venom can be used to refine pills? This is truly inconceivable. Zhang Xiaohua once again felt the vastness of the immortal Tao. Cough, cough. She had never heard of the last few pill formulas. It was better not to let Zhang Xiaohua make a fool of herself. Zhang Xiaohua still had the habit of using her money pouch. She placed the newly obtained jade slip into her money pouch. Immediately, she remembered that this belt could not be placed into her money pouch. Perhaps it was because the belt also had space, or because the belt space was larger than the money pouches. She just didn't know if the money pouch could be placed into the belt. However, no matter how Zhang Xiaohua tried, she was unable to place the money pouch into the belt. Zhang Xiaohua came to a conclusion. As long as it was a space that could be used to store things, it could not be placed into another space that could be used to store things. AI, true knowledge comes from practice. After coming to this conclusion, Zhang Xiaohua very naturally raised her left hand and looked at the small ring on her left hand's middle finger. Her divine sense tried to place the small ring into the belt, but it did not succeed. Needless to say, according to the conclusion just now, this small ring must also have a space inside. However, when Zhang Xiaohua immersed her divine sense into it, she encountered a strong reaction from the restriction of the small ring. She could not penetrate it all. Moreover, the fluctuation of the restriction was obscure, far different from that of the belt and the money pouch. For the time being, Zhang Xiaohua did not know how to break it. There was no way to put the belt into the money pouch. Naturally, she could only use it as its most basic function. Zhang Xiaohua tied the belt around her waist and released her divine sense. She carefully looked around herself and was secretly proud. This Xiaoxia is wearing a new belt. I still have some temperament. Ahem, isn't it a waste to use my divine sense as a bronze mirror? Zhang Xiaohua tidied up her clothes. Lu Lihong's corpse on the ground had almost been corroded by the strong poison, leaving only his clothes on the ground. Looking at Lu Lihong, who was still alive and wanted to sneak an attack on her, now dead, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but shake her head. Although she had a lot of understanding of the way of heaven's life and death, there was still a long way to go to understand it thoroughly. Lu Lihong's problem had been solved. Presumably, even if Deputy Hall Master Su wanted Zhang Xiaohua's life, he would not send another outer core disciple. With the strength that Zhang Xiaohua had shown before, Lu Lihong alone was more than enough. Besides, if Deputy Hall Master Su's hand could reach into the Wuming Hall and order other disciples, would he still need to rope in Lu Lihong and send him to the Wuming Hall from the expanding Elixir Hall? Moreover, do you think the two Hall Masters of the Wuming Hall are eating porridge? How could they let Deputy Hall Master Su's hand stretch too far? Although Zhang Xiaohua did not know a lot of things, she knew that her identity was a disciple of the expanding Elixir Hall's grass department. In the eyes of all the disciples of the fragrant religion, it was impossible for her to be Lu Lihong's opponent. Therefore, Deputy Hall Master Su could not possibly have a backup plan. She was now safe. Well, it should be said that she would not be disturbed by that annoying fly anymore. The next thing to do was naturally to find the ice soul grass, which was her main purpose in coming to the Yulon Grand Canyon. Carefully identifying the direction again, and looking at the terrain features that senior brother Liao had mentioned, Zhang Xiaohua picked a direction. She used the imperial wind technique to float forward in the forest without stepping on the ground. After walking for the time of a meal, they arrived at a place with sparse trees. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes lit up when he saw a few unknown herbs growing on the empty ground in front of him. At the top of the herbs were strings of small, bright red fruits. The fragrance of these fruits assailed his nostrils. However, the shape of this red fruit was strange. It was not round like the usual round shape, but rather long. Zhang Xiaohua found it strange, so he carefully recalled in his mind. There was no such thing in the compendium of herbs that he had seen. Could it be some kind of special spirit fruit? Zhang Xiaohua was happy and was about to fly forward when suddenly, in the other direction of the open land, a beast like a squirrel appeared. If it was not for the short horn on the beast's head, Zhang Xiaohua would have thought that it was a common squirrel. She saw the squirrel jump to the front of the open land and stare at the spirit fruit with its two black eyes. It seemed that it was attracted by the rich fragrance. Zhang Xiaohua was alarmed and thought that someone was going to steal it. Just as she was about to fly, the spirit fruit slightly trembled. Zhang Xiaohua was taken aback. There wasn't any wind at this moment. Moreover, the way the spirit fruit was shaking was different from when it was blown by the wind. He immediately released his divine sense and scanned the spirit fruit. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. At this moment, the squirrel could not resist the temptation of the fragrance and jumped towards the spirit fruit. However, when it was 3 feet away from the spirit fruit, its body suddenly sank. Its legs disappeared from the ground and sank deep into the mud. This was actually a swamp. A strange change occurred, and the fragrant spirit fruit immediately flew up from the ground. Below the spirit fruit was a pure white triangular object. Below the triangular object was a huge and ugly head that looked very similar to a bull's head. On the head, there was a huge mouth that took up more than half of the head. The huge mouth did not hesitate and opened to bite the pitiful squirrel. The squirrel's 4 legs sank into the swamp and was struggling. However, when it saw the spirit fruit turn into a huge mouth, it was stunned and was swallowed into the stomach of the huge mouth. Then the huge head opened its small eyes and looked around. Immediately, it closed its eyes and sank back into the swamp. Only the fresh red spirit fruit was left outside, emitting a rich fragrance. Zhang Xiaohua, who was watching from afar, almost burst into laughter. This guy was really despicable. He actually had something that looked like a spirit fruit growing on his head. It even emitted a fragrance that almost deceived him. If he had not used his divine sense to check in advance, he would have been fooled by it if he was not careful. Just when Zhang Xiaohua was about to turn around, he suddenly saw a 3-leaf grass at the side of the swamp. The edges of each leaf were serrated and there were thin white hairs. Just now, he was focused on the fake spirit fruit and did not even look in that direction. Moreover, the appearance of the grass was very ordinary and the difference at the edges was very small. If he did not see it by chance, Zhang Xiaohua would have missed it. Cypress flower grass. Zhang Xiaohua almost shouted out. This was an extremely rare spirit herb. It was rare even when the immortal Tao was flourishing. Although it was not the main ingredient for refining any elixir, it was an indispensable auxiliary ingredient for refining many high-grade elixirs. Moreover, this cypress flower grass was also very old. It would only grow 1 leaf every 100 years. This 3-leaved cypress flower grass was 300 years old. This was something Zhang Xiaohua had never dreamed of. Cough, cough. Zhang Xiaohua forgot again that he would not dream. Cypress flower grass was considered a high-grade spirit herb. However, this kind of spirit herb needed to be picked with a spell. Previously, Zhang Xiaohua had only picked low-grade spirit herbs and had never used them. Now that he had encountered cypress flower grass, Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to make a last-minute effort. After thinking for a moment, he familiarized himself with the method of harvesting the spirit grass. Zhang Xiaohua circulated his true qi and used the imperial wind technique to rush towards the cypress flower grass. Just as he was about to approach the cypress flower grass, he heard a roar. The beast hiding in the swamp jumped out of the swamp and opened its mouth to bite Zhang Xiaohua. The fake spirit fruit on its horn emitted an even stronger fragrance. Zhang Xiaohua smelled a little, and his head was slightly dizzy. This beast was actually the guardian beast of cypress flower. Chapter 638. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. He quickly closed his mouth and nose, kicked the beast's horn, and kicked the beast's head off. Then, without delay, he launched a spell with his left hand. A transparent light shield was released from Zhang Xiaohua's hand and quickly flew toward the three-leaf cypress grass, covering the three-leaf cypress grass in it. At this time, the guardian beast roared and rushed over again. Zhang Xiaohua was rather carefree. She used the imperial wind technique and flew into the air. After a distance, she waved her hand, and the light shield flew up from the ground with the three-leaf cypress grass and directly into Zhang Xiaohua's hand. Zhang Xiaohua then took out a jade box from her money pouch and quickly put it in. Then, she flew forward and cast a spell on the jade box. Finally, she put the jade box back in her money pouch. Below Zhang Xiaohua's feet, the guardian beast was already envious. It abandoned the swamp and chased after Zhang Xiaohua in the air. Along the way, it easily broke the trees that were blocking its way. Seeing that she couldn't shake off the beast, Zhang Xiaohua landed and burrowed into the ground, heading in another direction. That beast chased Zhang Xiaohua to the place where she landed. When it couldn't find Zhang Xiaohua's shadow, it was incomparably furious. It broke the surrounding flowers and trees until they were all razed to the ground. It was also tired, so it roared and walked back. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua had burrowed to a place where the fragrance of flowers permeated the air. This place was already out of the forest and was a low-lying area. The whole area was about 20 feet in radius, and there were countless flowers and plants. Naturally, there were also many valuable medicinal herbs. Zhang Xiaohua burrowed out of the ground and came to a corner of the low-lying area. Looking at the medicinal herbs here, she was a little confused. The medicinal herbs here were obviously growing much better than in other places. Previously in Rejuvenation Valley, Tianmu Peak, opposite the river, and in the forest just now, it was all incomparable. When Zhang Xiaohua released her divine sense, she discovered that the heaven and earth essence qi in this low-lying area was so dense that she had never seen it before. Zhang Xiaohua was deep in thought. If there was such dense heaven and earth essence qi, it was understandable that the medicinal herbs could grow so well. However, another question arose. Why was the heaven and earth essence qi here much denser than in other places? Although this kind of heaven and earth essence qi was not enough for one to step into the ranks of the immortal Tao, it was still enough to make people raise their eyebrows. Zhang Xiaohua was about to investigate in detail when she suddenly heard the cry of a bird. That sound actually went straight into Zhang Xiaohua's Naiwan Palace, causing Zhang Xiaohua's entire mind to tremble. What kind of bird is this? Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. Immediately, she used God's guidance with all her might to eliminate the discomfort in her mind. Zhang Xiaohua looked up and saw a huge bird of prey flying over from the south. Its wings were about 10 feet wide, and its body was also about 10 feet long. Its entire body was covered in golden feathers that shone under the sunlight. The bird's head was also huge, and there was a circle of long white fur around its neck. The eyes on the bird's head were the size of a fist and were staring fiercely at Zhang Xiaohua. Its long beak was like a sharp sword, opening and closing, occasionally letting out ear-piercing cries. Monkey hunting bird? Zhang Xiaohua was greatly shocked. That day when they came out from the canyon, Zhang Xiaohua asked about some information regarding the human-faced monkeys. Among them, Lu Chaoxian told her about the human-faced monkey's natural enemy, the monkey-hunting bird. This monkey-hunting bird liked to feed on human-faced monkeys, and as long as the monkey-hunting bird appeared, The human-faced monkeys could only wait to be captured and obediently let the monkey-hunting bird eat the monkeys it liked to eat. When the monkey-hunting bird was full, the rest of the human-faced monkeys would be able to escape as if they had been pardoned. According to Liu Chaoxian's estimation, the last time they encountered so many human-faced monkeys passing through the rainforest, it was most likely that they had just been attacked by the monkey-hunting bird. The human-faced monkeys were so clever and agile, but they were eaten alive by the monkey-hunting bird. The most powerful thing about the monkey-hunting bird was its ear-piercing cries. As long as the monkey-hunting bird cried out, all the monkeys it came into contact with would become limp and collapse to the ground, allowing the monkey-hunting bird to wantonly ravage them. It was a pity that the monkey-hunting bird encountered Zhang Xiaohua today. Not to mention Zhang Xiaohua's divine ability as an immortal cultivator. Just the golden restriction on the core of his Naiwan palace would not allow the ear-piercing cries of the monkey-hunting bird to break through in the slightest. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was still standing there unharmed, a hint of anger flashed through the monkey-hunting bird's eyes. When it flew closer, its huge wings flapped, and there was actually a faint sound of wind and thunder. Its long beak, which was like a sharp sword, attacked Zhang Xiaohua together with a huge gust of wind. Zhang Xiaohua frowned. She stretched out her hand and took out the jade water sword from her bosom. She injected some true qi into it, and a sword ray that was 3 feet long emerged from her body. Following a wave of Zhang Xiaohua's right hand, the entire sword ray was like a real long sword, chopping towards the monkey-hunting bird's long beak. Seeing the brilliance of the sword ray, the monkey-hunting bird seemed to know how powerful it was. It did not dare to use its long beak to meet the attack head-on. It nodded its head slightly, and as if it knew a wondrous sword technique, it pointed towards Zhang Xiaohua's wrist. Zhang Xiaohua retracted her hand, and the sword ray was like a spirit snake flicking its tongue towards the long beak that was pecking at her. A crisp caw sound was heard as the sword ray and the monkey-hunting bird's long beak collided. Although the monkey-hunting bird's long beak was powerful, how could it compare to the sword ray? Following that, a light sound was heard as the sword ray pierced the monkey-hunting bird's long beak. The monkey-hunting bird was shocked. It flapped its wings forward, and its entire body moved backwards. Zhang Xiaohua did not chase after it. Instead, she slashed the sword ray towards the monkey-hunting bird's wings. Indeed, with a few poochie sounds, a few feathers fell from the monkey-hunting bird's wings. The monkey-hunting bird's wings were strong, and its feathers were hard. Usually, it would not be at a disadvantage when facing an enemy. Today, when it met Zhang Xiaohua, in just one round, not only was its sword-like long beak injured, many of its feathers were also shaved off. The monkey-hunting bird, who had suffered a great loss, did not fly into a rage out of humiliation. Instead, it flapped its wings and soared up. Without even looking at Zhang Xiaohua, it immediately flew towards the other side of the depression. Wow! Zhang Xiaohua saw this and was very surprised. This monkey-hunting bird was really too smart. He had already prepared other backup plans and was even going to take out Chasing Dream. But this monkey-hunting bird did not even retaliate. Once it saw that it was not its opponent, it immediately fled. Was this still a bird? Such a smart and powerful bird. Even if the human-faced monkey was so clever, it was still easily hunted down by the monkey-hunting bird. When the monkey-hunting bird flew far away, Zhang Xiaohua then released his spiritual awareness and carefully observed everything in this depression. When he saw the middle of the depression, there was obviously a huge bird's nest. He then understood that this depression was actually the home of the monkey-hunting bird. He was standing in front of its door. No wonder it was attacked by it. And he had indiscriminately chased the owner away. Was this considered as a turtle dove occupying a magpie's nest? It was just that, since he had already chased it away, what was the use of thinking about this now? Zhang Xiaohua looked for a long time and did not discover any array or prohibition on this depression. This made him even more puzzled. The qi of heaven and earth was related to spiritual herbs, but if there was no special place here, how could it be richer than other places? Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua patted his head, made a gesture, and immediately escaped into the depression. Nonsense. He couldn't see any clues on the ground, of course. He had to look underground. Sure enough, as Zhang Xiaohua escaped underground, he felt that the qi of heaven and earth here had a little change. Although this change was very subtle, it was enough to show that the answer he wanted to find was below. However, the more Zhang Xiaohua went down, the more troublesome he felt. It was like walking in the sand with his feet wrapped in the sand. Walking was extremely difficult, and his speed gradually slowed down. Moreover, the cyan light shield formed by the qi was slowly compressed inside. Zhang Xiaohua also gradually felt a majestic pressure on his body, like a huge mountain gradually pressing on his body. Zhang Xiaohua was a little surprised and stopped the earth escape. As a result, the pressure no longer increased, and the light shield did not shrink inside. Then, Zhang Xiaohua escaped to the ground for a while, and the light shield slowly expanded, and the pressure on his body slowly reduced. Stopping again, Zhang Xiaohua stroked his chin thoughtfully. In the past, when he used the earth escape technique, he had never gone so deep, so he didn't feel so many changes. Now, it seemed that the depth of the earth escape technique was related to his cultivation level. The deeper he went, the greater the pressure, and the light shield formed by his Zhen Qi needed to be stronger. If he went to a certain depth, he probably wouldn't be able to go any further. And it seemed that when he escaped into magma on the deserted island, it was much deeper than this. However, magma may be different from pure earth. At that time, he also used the fire-earth escape technique, so there should be some variations. After thinking about it, Zhang Xiaohua injected the qi into the light shield and went straight down. After a while, Zhang Xiaohua felt that the light shield had been pressed to his body, and the pressure on his body was also very great. However, he waved his arms up and down. He could move freely. Is it related to the bone honing of the fist of the North Star? Zhang Xiaohua thought to himself, forget it, it is a good thing anyway. Although I can't continue to go down, I can still move freely under such pressure. Even if I encounter any danger, I can deal with it. Zhang Xiaohua then used his divine sense to explore the surroundings. Suddenly, he was stunned, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. He made a gesture and went down for more than 50 feet to the right. He stopped in front of a stone as white as jade. It turned out to be a piece of jade. Jade Lo. A huge question mark flashed in Zhang Xiaohua's mind. Previously, Zhang Xiaohua heard from Bai Huan and others that the disciples of Shuyu Hall specialized in digging jade. The jade boxes used by the Pill Expansion Hall were all provided by Shuyu Hall, and this jade was probably not exposed to the outside world. It should be like the jade in front of Zhang Xiaohua, buried deep underground. However, if the jade in 9 Radiance Peak was buried so deep, how could the disciples of Shuyu Hall mine it? Chapter 639. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua had already reached her limit and stopped about 10 feet above the jade mine. As her divine sense swept past, she felt that there were still many jade stones buried below. She only felt that within a few feet, it was all pure white jade stones. As for how much more there were below, she did not know. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes lit up. She reached out and took out Chasing Dream. Forming a seal, she directly pierced into the jade stone below her feet. When Chasing Dream was above ground, Zhang Xiaohua was already able to use it freely, as if it was her own arm. But now that they were deep underground, Zhang Xiaohua was still being suppressed by a strong pressure and could not continue to descend, not to mention the small sword Chasing Dream. Zhang Xiaohua felt that the small sword seemed to be moving in a sticky swamp. Every inch it went down was extremely exhausting. This 10 feet distance was like 100 feet in the air. When the small sword pierced into the jade stone, Zhang Xiaohua heaved a sigh of relief. With a flick of her wrist, she pried off a piece of the pure white jade stone. With a wave of her hand, Chasing Dream and the jade stone slowly flew into Zhang Xiaohua's hand. Zhang Xiaohua used her hand to receive the jade stone. Her divine sense gradually immersed into it. After a careful inspection, she withdrew her divine sense with extreme disappointment. It turned out that although this jade stone was pure white, but the heaven and earth yuan qi it contained was the same as the jade stone that Zhang Xiaohua had obtained previously. It could not even compare to the jade coffin lid in his money bag. How could it not disappoint him? How could it not shatter his hopes of making a fortune? However, he immediately understood that although the heaven and earth yuan qi in this jade stone was thin, but if the jade mine was big enough, the amount of heaven and earth yuan qi emitted from the jade stone would not be small. This amount was not enough for people to cultivate the way of immortality, but it was more than enough to support the growth of various spiritual herbs. Presumably, this was the reason why the spiritual herbs in the monkey-eating bird's nest grew so well. This should also be the reason why the monkey-eating bird placed its nest in this depression. Haha, this monkey-eating bird can actually find a place with dense heaven and earth yuan qi. This is also a special ability. Hee, I just don't know if the meat of that bird also contains yuan qi. Zhang Xiaohua thought with a sense of hunger. Zhang Xiaohua placed the jade stone and chasing dream into her bosom. She didn't have the mood to stay in this dark place any longer. She made a hand seal and returned to the surface. When he stood on the marshland with fresh air and looked at the bright and beautiful sky, he couldn't help but be in a good mood. Humming a little tune, he picked the more rare and older medicinal herbs in the marshland one by one and put them into the jade box in his money pouch. Only then did he clap his hands and lie down in the nest of the monkey-eating bird. There was a lot of soft green grass. Zhang Xiaohua was lying on the ground, but it wasn't even half the size of the nest. I don't know where this ice spirit grass is. Although senior martial brother Liao said it clearly, Yulan Twilight only refines it once every 5 years. I don't know when he came in. Even if it was the last time, it should have been 5 years ago. Perhaps the markings around the location have changed. If it's been 10 years, then there's no need to talk about it. I also picked a lot of other spiritual herbs. It should be enough to concoct pills. However, if I want to concoct the Huandan pill, it won't be enough. It seems that I have to go further. Perhaps I'll find some new clues. That's right, what is this Yao pill? Is it a type of pill that can be refined? I've never heard of using a pill to refine another pill. Elder was Jade Slip, Rejuvenation Valley's Jade Slip, and the Jade Slip in Spreading Fragrance Cult's pill room didn't mention it either. This is really strange. AI, this Tao of immortality is really strange. After resting for a while, Zhang Xiaohua no longer searched far away. She closed her eyes and cultivated in this place filled with the natural energy of heaven and earth. When the sky darkened, she opened her eyes and looked around. There was no trace of the monkey-eating bird. It must have been scared half to death by her and would only return after she left. Chuckling, Zhang Xiaohua walked out of the depression. Suddenly, a thought popped in her mind. Earlier, she had encountered a jade mine. Due to her lack of cultivation, she couldn't go in and take a look. She didn't know what the natural energy of heaven and earth inside the jade mine was like. However, just because she couldn't see the jade mine here didn't mean she couldn't see the other jade mines. The disciples of Cleansing Jade Hall on 9 Radiance Peak specialized in mining jade. Although they couldn't directly go underground, they could dig a tunnel. If she had the chance, should she go to 9 Radiance Peak and take a look? Take a look at the Spreading Fragrance Cult's jade mine? Just by looking at the abundance of jade boxes in the pill repository hall, she knew that jade was commonly used in the Spreading Fragrance Cult. Extrapolating from that, she also knew how big the jade mine on 9 Radiance Peak was. It shouldn't be comparable to the mine here. Darkness was a huge obstacle for others, but it was the best cover for Zhang Xiaohua. She used the wind-controlling technique and crossed the river in less than the time it took to eat a meal. She arrived at the high ground next to the camp. Looking at the flickering lights in the camp, Zhang Xiaohua smiled. Although they worked hard and didn't reap much, it was still relatively safe. If they had encountered Lu Lihong today, it was unlikely they would have returned. Not to mention the disappearance of the pill repository hall's herb gatherers. Even the disappearance of an outer disciple like Lu Li Hong wouldn't have attracted anyone's attention. Human lives were worthless in the Valley of Orchids at dusk. Tonight, Zhang Xiaohua didn't return to the camp to rest. Instead, she waited until midnight before returning to the camp. She set up a restriction around Lu Chaoxian's tent before returning to the high slope. She found the cave from before and began to cultivate alone. Just like this, 5 days passed in a row. Zhang Xiaohua still didn't find the ice soul grass she wanted to pick. Moreover, because Zhang Xiaohua didn't return for several days, Lu Chaoxian and the others thought that Zhang Xiaohua had died in the mouth of a ferocious beast. When they talked about it, they sighed. Obeying the law is really important. If it weren't for Vice Hall Master Su's lecture, how could she have been punished to pick an impossible spiritual herb? If she wasn't looking for the spiritual herb with Ren Xiaoyao's martial arts, how could she have peacefully hidden in this strange birch forest to pick the herbs? How could she have lost her life for no reason? On this day, Zhang Xiaohua walked a little far. It was between 2 mountains near the continuous mountain range. In these few days, Zhang Xiaohua searched everywhere for the ice soul grass. She also saw many ferocious beasts, such as a big-mouthed bird that could suddenly fly out of the water, a ferocious beast with a huge horn on its head that looked like a cow, and even a small rabbit that ran very fast. However, Zhang Xiaohua wasn't here to train, so she wasn't interested in these beasts. Even if they took the initiative to attack Zhang Xiaohua would just reveal her small hand to subdue them and immediately let them go. After all, she was the one who disturbed the peace of others. If she continued to kill the beasts, it would seem unkind. Zhang Xiaohua had just flown to this extremely steep mountain. Before she could steady her feet, she suddenly felt a cold breath rush over. Now that Zhang Xiaohua's big dipper magical fist had reached a small success, the threads of red on her white bones had gradually thickened. Moreover, her Zhenqi had also reached the middle stage of the qi refining stage, so she wasn't afraid of this cold. However, the incense cult had always been like spring all year round. The sudden cold here made Zhang Xiaohua a little surprised. However, besides being surprised, she was also secretly happy. Ice soul grass and cold light grass both liked the cold. The colder it was, the more beneficial it was for the growth of these two herbs. However, the climate of the incense cult meant that the production of these two herbs was not high. This was also the reason why Zhang Xiaohua had not been able to find them. Of course, there were also herbs growing in the strange birch forest. Zhang Xiaohua had also picked up cold light grass in the forest, but these herbs also grew in shady places. The place that Liao Shixiang had mentioned was also the location of a cold pond. However, Zhang Xiaohua had not been able to find it after searching for a long time. Now that she saw a cold place here, the chances of finding ice soul grass had increased by a lot. Zhang Xiaohua flew to the peak of the valley. It was getting colder and colder. The ground was hard rock. Even the grass did not grow. Following the bottom of the valley, she walked for a while. Everywhere was bare. Where was the spirit grass? Was she going to return empty-handed again? Zhang Xiaohua could not help but feel a little disheartened. However, after turning around a huge rock blocking the way, the road at the bottom of the valley extended downwards. It seemed that there was a burst of cold wind blowing from the bottom of the valley. Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. She no longer searched carefully. She floated up more than a foot and flew straight into the depths of the valley. After flying for a while, the terrain gradually lowered. Finally, there was a row of huge stone pillars blocking the top of the valley. The road ahead seemed to lead to the underground. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was hesitating, her eyes lit up again. This time, she had reached the end of the valley. At the end of the valley was a cave entrance. A burst of cold air overflowed from the inside of the cave. Then, following the direction of the valley, it was blown into the air by the mountain wind. The wind naturally made the entire valley extremely cold. Looking at the surroundings of the cave entrance, it was also bare. Not to mention the ice soul grass, there was not even a bit of green grass. Perhaps she could only see it when she entered the cave. After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua took out the jade water sword and the luminous pearl from her bosom. Then, she slowly walked into the dark and cold cave. Although the cave entrance was huge and looked very frightening, when Zhang Xiaohua released her divine sense, she felt that it was abnormally quiet inside. After walking for the time it took to brew a cup of tea, she could faintly hear the whistling of the wind. This wind blew past the strange mountain rocks. Even the sound was somewhat strange. At first, it was hair-raising. However, walking on an extremely flat mountain path, her divine sense could see 100 feet ahead. After listening to this ghost-like sound for a long time, she was tired of it. On the contrary, amidst the silence, along with Zhang Xiaohua's faintly discernible footsteps, the entire cave seemed to be a little livelier. Chapter 640. Zhang Xiaohua slowly followed the path in the cave. The path was smooth and even better than the path outside the cave. However, the path was full of twists and turns. After a few twists and turns, Zhang Xiaohua completely lost her sense of direction. Furthermore, the path was downwards as if she was going to enter the ground. After a few turns, the path gradually widened and Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense could no longer see everything. All of a sudden, a three-way fork appeared on the road that had been going downwards all along. This alerted Zhang Xiaohua. She used her divine sense to check both sides and felt that the path on the left was safer. Hence, Zhang Xiaohua did not hesitate to walk towards the left. After walking for a while, a trace of vigilance appeared in her divine sense. Zhang Xiaohua immediately stopped and raised a luminous pearl. Just as she was about to check, she heard a flapping sound in front of her. Countless black shadows flew towards Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. "There are birds here." He looked up and saw countless black birds that were bigger than a fist. Cough, cough. They were not birds, as they did not have feathers. They flapped their fleshy wings, and their eyes glowed red. They were like bees that had seen a flower, and they flew toward Zhang Xiaohua. Bats? Zhang Xiaohua almost screamed. However, these bats seemed a little too big. Furthermore, they were not afraid of humans. Zhang Xiaohua had never seen bats that were not afraid of humans. Just as he was about to release his divine sense, it felt as if it was hit by countless hammers the moment it left his body. The impact caused the Dancor in Zhang Xiaohua's Naiwan Palace to churn. "Io, what is going on?" Zhang Xiaohua could not help but be shocked and quickly retracted his divine sense. Ever since he started cultivating his divine sense, other than the time he was attacked in the cave filled with black smoke, this was the second time his divine sense was attacked. Furthermore, the attack was inexplicable. The moment his divine sense left his body, he did not even see what was going on outside before it was hit. Furthermore, the situation did not end there. The countless hammers did not seem to give up. They followed the path of his divine sense and attacked his Naiwan Palace. They went straight for the layer of golden seal outside his Dancor. Pili Pala, a series of loud sounds could be heard. Zhang Xiaohua's Naiwan Palace was in chaos. The countless hammers were like a violent storm that rained down on the golden seal, causing the seal to shine brightly. Following which, the golden light on the seal started to flow like fireflies. A golden talisman gradually became dazzling and gradually enlarged. It caught all the attacks one by one. The more attacks there were, the clearer the golden talisman became. In a flash, its true appearance was revealed. It was actually a three-legged crow. The crow stood in the air, and the 365 small talismans were rotating as if they were alive. There seemed to be traces of flames flickering between the talismans. Although it was a three-legged crow formed by talismans, it still had an imposing manner that looked down on the world. The attacks from the outside continued to silently invade his Naiwan Palace. When they collided with the talismans of the three-legged crow, they caused golden sparks to fly out like fireworks. In the blink of an eye, the three-legged crow seemed to be somewhat impatient. The golden talismans that were formed by the talismans slightly spread out its wings, following which, it opened its golden beak slightly and roared. A formless sound wave was emitted from Zhang Xiaohua's Naiwan Palace. Although the battle in the Naiwan Palace was very complicated, In reality, it only lasted for a few short moments. When a swarm of large bats was about 50 feet away from Zhang Xiaohua, the formless sound wave was emitted from Zhang Xiaohua's Naiwan Palace and from Zhang Xiaohua's head. When the sound wave was emitted, the swarm of large bats that were attacking Zhang Xiaohua immediately turned into nothingness. Moreover, when the sound wave approached the large bats, it was as if a sharp sword had pierced through them. The large bats immediately fell to the ground as if they had been infected by the plague. Zhang Xiaohua was at a loss of what to do. When she saw this scene, she couldn't help but be overjoyed. Her Dan heart surged, and she wanted to activate the three-legged crow's talismans to attack again. However, the crow didn't seem to fall for her trick. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't make it move. Seeing that the large bats were another 10 feet away from her, Zhang Xiaohua took out Chasing Dream from her bosom. Just as she was about to release it, she saw the golden crow in her Naiwan Palace lazily open its beak. The formless sound wave was emitted from its body again, and wave after wave of bats fell to the ground. Not long after, more than half of the large bats fell to the ground, following which, Zhang Xiaohua didn't hold back anymore. She released Chasing Dream and freely executed the dream-weaving swordplay within a radius of 10 feet. Ever since Zhang Xiaohua learned the dream-weaving swordplay, she had been practicing it. This was the first time she had used a real attack like this. Although she was familiar with it in the beginning, there were still gaps between the moves. From time to time, a large bat would escape from the small sword attack. As time passed, she became more and more familiar with the dream-weaving swordplay. Although it was only a small sword, it was as if countless small swords were shuttling around Zhang Xiaohua at the same time, protecting him completely. As for the large bats, they seemed to have never seen a living person before. Perhaps it was because they could smell the scent of blood and flesh on Zhang Xiaohua's body. Although most of them fell to the ground from the impact of the sound wave, and some were pierced by the dream-weaving swordplay and died on the ground, the remaining bats continued to charge towards Zhang Xiaohua as if they didn't care about their lives. Seeing that there weren't many large bats left, Zhang Xiaohua took out a few dark green coins from her bosom. With a shake of her hand, she threw them at different places in the air. From each of the coins, a ball of red flames was shot out. The balls of red flames rushed towards the remaining large bats from different angles. Just as Zhang Xiaohua expected, the large bats were extremely afraid of fire. When they saw the light, they prepared to scatter and flee. However, the jade talismans shot out from different directions. It was a simple formation. Although there were still many bats, they couldn't escape the attack of the flames. As long as the slightest spark touched these large black bats, they would immediately burst into flames. In an instant, all of the large bats were set ablaze. Like small fireballs, they fled in different directions in panic. Reflecting the light of the flames, Zhang Xiaohua could vaguely see most of the scene in the underground cave. This was a huge karst cave. Above her head, there were all kinds of stone pillars. Some were upside down, some were upright, and some were in different postures. As the small fireballs scattered and fell, the entire karst cave was soon plunged into darkness. Only the luminous pearl in Zhang Xiaohua's hand emitted a faint brilliance. Silence, only silence. Occasionally, the large bats on the ground that were not completely dead would flap their wings and make a dying struggle. Also, the aroma of barbecued meat filled the entire karst cave. Sighed. Zhang Xiaohua sighed. Holding the luminous pearl in her hand, she continued forward. After walking for another half a meal, Zhang Xiaohua entered a karst cave that was even bigger than the previous one. The brilliance of the luminous pearl was still limited. Zhang Xiaohua threw it into the air and drove it around the entire karst cave. She couldn't help but be surprised and delighted. What surprised her was that in this huge karst cave, there were all kinds of strange stone pillars. There were actually all kinds of shapes. They were like humans, beasts, trees, mountains, and so on. There were so many of them. It was indeed an eye-opener for Zhang Xiaohua. What was special was that, in the middle of the karst cave, there was a huge cold pond. The oppressive cold air was emitted from there. Even though Zhang Xiaohua had the magical power of tempering her bones and refining her body, she still couldn't help but shiver. However, what made her happy was also this cold pond. Not to mention that there were countless spiritual herbs growing at the edge of the cold pond. Not only ice soul grass and cold light grass, there were also many other rare spiritual herbs that Zhang Xiaohua couldn't name. Moreover, they were all very old. At first glance, even Zhang Xiaohua couldn't tell how old they were. The most unique thing was that in the middle of the cold pool, there was a bowl-shaped stone pillar protruding from water. The stone pillar was surrounded by black and white vine-like objects. At the top of the black and white vines, there were two fruits. One of them was black and round, while the other was snow white. There were two sharp points in the middle. When one smelled it, there was no fragrance at all. Looking at the stone bowl again, there was a shallow layer of something milky white inside. Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense swept over it, and only felt that the qi of heaven and earth inside was unusually rich. It seemed to contain other things that Zhang Xiaohua didn't know about. However, looking at the top of the stone bowl, there was a huge stone pillar hanging directly from the top of the car's cave, directly above the stone bowl. At the top of the car's cave was the huge stone pillar, and at the bottom, there was a small point. At the top of the point, there was a drop of milky white liquid that was about to fall off the stone pillar and into the stone bowl. However, it was this drop that seemed to be very easy in normal times, but in this place, it seemed like it would never be completed. The drop of water just stood there, motionless. Seeing the milky white drop of water like this, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly understood. No wonder there was so little in the stone bowl. The reason was that the drop of water was too slow, or rather, it was too slow to form. The cave was so cold that even experts of the martial Dao could not casually enter, let alone ordinary people. Only cultivators of the immortal Dao, like Zhang Xiaohua, could have the opportunity to enter. In other words, no one should have entered this cave for 10,000 years. After 10,000 years, this stone bowl only contained a small amount of things. Even if Zhang Xiaohua thought about it, she knew that it was something extremely good. Therefore, without any hesitation, Zhang Xiaohua took out a jade bottle that contained pills and flew towards the center of the cold pond. However, just as Zhang Xiaohua's figure flew above the cold pool, he saw several strange things flying out of the cold pool that had been calmed just a moment ago with a whoosh sound. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.